Okay, so welcome to our The Case for Waste seminar. My name is Törmänen and I will guide you through this spectacular event. And first I would like to thank our sponsors, DeepGEO, WePlanet Finland, and ThinkAtom, WePlanet, and Anthropocene Institute. And we would like to have a word from WePlanet, and the welcome words will say Tea Törmänen. And for those who are wondering, yes, we are related. Tea Törmänen has a master's degree in animal behavior from the University of Exeter. She's currently working as an international coordinator for WePlanet, a new global environmental movement which is pro-human development, pro-science, and pro-technology. She's been in the movement since in the very beginning, chairing the local organization in Finland for 4 years before embarking on her international journey. Ms. Törmänen has been a vocal supporter of nuclear energy for over 20 years, challenging the common misconception that green climate/environmental activists can't be pro-nuclear. Please, Tea Törmänen. Okay, no niin.
Thank you, Taina. Welcome everyone on behalf of WePlanet as well. As mentioned, we are a pro-technology, pro-science, pro-human development. We want to liberate nature and elevate humanity. This means that we want to shrink the environmental footprint of humans while providing the high standard of living we all enjoy for every citizen of our world. We have been in the nuclear debate for years, and we support nuclear energy because it has one of the smallest environmental footprints of all energy forms. It provides reliable 24/7 energy to power our industries, for example, and keeping our lights on. And we know that billions of people still suffer from energy poverty, and we want to change that. And nuclear is one of the best tools to solve that problem. One of the arguments that we hear against nuclear is the waste. That's one of the most common ones, definitely. Not in Finland, but in many other countries. We operate in 18 countries right now, so we are a global movement. In Finland, we have solved this problem. It's not a scientific problem. It's not an engineering problem. It's a political problem. And in Finland, we've been able to solve this problem. And that's why we think that we should let others know how we do it in Finland, how we've done it. And we should be the forerunners in this industry and maybe help other countries with their waste disposal. And that's why we wanted to support this report. And I want to congratulate Rauli on finishing this excellent report. And we hope this works as a conversation starter, not only in Finland, but globally. Let's face it, we need the money in Finland, and if we're not going to do it, Sweden will do it. So let's be brave and embrace this as one of the solutions. We know that, for example, the sustainable finance taxonomy requires for countries to have a solution for waste, and we know funding is one of the key problems preventing nuclear to become more to play a bigger role in our energy systems. So we need this funding, and we can help other countries to fulfill this requirement by providing them a waste service for nuclear waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tea. And next we'll have a keynote speech, which will be in form of video. Okay, you decided. Okay, sorry. So now WePlanet Finland will have a word. Johanna, please.
Thank you. So my name is Johanna Kohvakka. I work for the Finnish Ecomodernist Society, which is part of WePlanet currently. So we are also one of the parties who have founded this publication and are very proud of it. Ecomodernism is an environmental movement that seeks to defend and enhance the environment's well-being while at the same time increasing possibilities for human prosperity. These two values are indeed inseparable. Only progressive and affluent humanity can devote sufficient resources on the protection of the environment diversity. But on the other hand, human prosperity is dependent on the well-being of the natural world. And also, we want to base our solutions on science, even though sometimes it's not so popular. Luckily, the popularity of nuclear has been increasing recently. And this publication seeks for solutions for the last remaining issue that we have had with this with this best sustainable energy source that there is for nuclear waste. So thanks on behalf of the Finnish Economist Society to all the other funders who made this possible, and of course Rauli for writing this. Thanks.
So now we have our keynote speech, which is in form of video, and our keynote speaker is Sama Bilbao Wailian. Sama Bilbao Wailian, the Director General of the World Nuclear Association, will give the keynote speech. She will deliver it via pre-coded video because she's currently in South Korea and cannot participate live.
Good morning, Hyvää huomenta, and hello from Korea, which is where I am currently, unfortunately not being able to join you because I am at the World Nuclear Association's Cordell workshop that will start tomorrow. But I do want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to join you in this seminar that launches the report, The Case for Waste, evaluating the opportunities and the challenges for commercial multinational nuclear waste repositories in Finland. Thank you, Rauli, for the invitation, and congratulations again on the release of the report. I think that it is quite visionary to commence conversations of this controversial topic in Finland. Finland is a shining example of innovation and responsibility in the field of nuclear energy. The country has been a pioneer in adopting nuclear power, which now accounts for about 35% of its electricity generation. The Finnish nuclear operators are recognized for their performance and excellence in operation. And of course, the recent commencement of the Olkiluoto 3 reactor, Europe's largest, marks a significant milestone enhancing Finland's energy independence and further solidifying its status as a leader in clean energy production. STUK, Finland's nuclear regulator, stands as a paragon of safety, excellence, and rigorous regulatory oversight. And in particular, very relevantly for today's discussions, Finland's approach to use nuclear fuel and nuclear waste management is also commendable. With the world's first deep geological repository under construction and expected to start operation in the next year or two. So first of all, congratulations to Posiva for the very hard work that you have done to get Onkalo up and running. And I really think that this coordinated work by all the actors of the Finnish nuclear sector not only fosters public confidence in nuclear energy, but also contributes significantly to Finland's reputation as a leader in sustainable and safe energy production. So now, let me zoom out a little bit of Finland and put the current situation for nuclear energy in perspective. In the last couple of years, nuclear energy has seen a significant resurgence. policymakers, energy thought leaders, the finance community, media, and civil society are recognizing both the enormous contributions of the existing nuclear fleet and the essential need to accelerate the deployment of new nuclear for energy security and independence, and also to meet Paris Agreement targets in a cost-effective and equitable manner. Last December in Dubai at COP28, we saw 25 countries coming together to boldly call for the ambitious goal of tripling global nuclear capability by 2050. And then the global nuclear industry accepted the challenge through the Net Zero Nuclear Initiative led by World Nuclear Association. And we had over 120 companies that pledged to accelerate their efforts to meet this 3 times nuclear capacity commitment. Of course, much work is needed to achieve this very challenging target. And frankly, one of the key issues that needs to be addressed is the long-term management of used nuclear fuel and nuclear waste. We have now 33 countries operating nuclear power plants and 20 more at least that are considering very seriously to include nuclear in their energy mix. Some of these countries will choose a closed fuel cycle and will recycle their used nuclear fuel. And some of these countries will choose an open fuel cycle, such as Finland, and will store permanently their used fuel. But in both cases, we are going to need a deep geological repository. And although a few countries are making a lot of progress and will follow Finland's path towards the development of a deep geological repository, many other countries do not yet have a clear plan for the long-term management of their nuclear waste. And at the same time, is it necessary for each and every country to develop its own deep geological repository? Would it be more efficient and perhaps more cost-effective to develop a few multinational deep geological repositories instead, shared by a number of countries coming together? Granted, this is a controversial topic indeed that involves not only economics and engineering. Frankly, those are almost the easy parts. It also touches law, politics, equity, social justice. But I do think that this is a topic worth discussing, and I think that the publication that is being launched today and this seminar that you all are attending are a very, very good starting point to kick off a thoughtful conversation about the merits of this idea and about what would it take to get it off the ground. So as you embark today in this seminar journey, I wish each and every one of you an incredibly productive experience. I hope you will have a day filled with insightful discussions, innovative ideas, and collaborative learning. I encourage you all to embrace the spirit of curiosity, keep an open mind, and engage wholeheartedly in the conversation. Hard work and a willingness to explore new perspectives are the keys to unlocking the full potential of nuclear energy for the years to come. So I wish you a fruitful day that will propel all of us forward. Have a lovely day and thank you again.
So we'll move on to maybe one of the most juicy parts of this event, since Rauli Partanen will have his report presentation about the case for waste research. So Rauli Partanen is an award-winning science writer, energy analyst, and nuclear energy communicator. During the last 14 years, he has written dozens of books, reports, and articles on the topics of energy and environment. Since 2018, Rauli has been leading the non-profit think tank ThinkEDO. Please welcome Rauli.
Thank you so much. This is going very smoothly. It tells maybe something about me that I choose these very interesting mainstream topics and book the biggest room in Helsinki and hope that there will be at least 150 participants. We do have some people online, so you're not the only ones, but we will have a question and answer session after this presentation, so if you can write down your questions or even remember them, then go ahead. Now I'm trying to get into presenter mode. Yes, finally. You'll test this time and time again when you're at home, and then when you come here, everything crashes. So thank you for me as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the study. There's the broad structure of the study. There's an introduction talking a little bit about the energy transition without nuclear and then maybe with it. It discusses and explains what nuclear waste is, especially spent fuel and high-level waste, how much there is, what's the history of us taking care of it, and what are deep geological repositories. So it's a kind of educational piece if you want to give your students something to read. Then it discusses the case of commercial DGRs, what are the issues and the main benefits, some of the business cases I found possible, and then there's also a chapter on the future of spent fuel, what we could do with technologies like reprocessing and breeder reactors. So this is broadly the structure of my presentation as well. You heard about me already, so no need to go through these. I've been with the Ecomarine Society and WePlanet since the beginning, one of the co-founders there, and for the last 5-6 years I've been leading this non-profit think tank, Think Atom, which has published many studies. These are not even all of them, focusing on clean energy, nuclear energy, dispelling some of the myths around the technology and also finding out new places where we could use nuclear energy for deep decarbonization. Right, so nuclear waste. There's the cube, which is roughly the volume around the world that we have of spent fuel. It's about 35 meters across. It's not that much. Of course, it looks big, but then again, we've been producing nuclear energy for 60 years, so something is there. What is radioactive waste or rad waste? There's some definitions here, very low level, intermediate level, and high level. My study focuses mostly on the high level waste, which is less than 1% of the total total volume. But it has more than 95% of all the radioactivity. So that's really the kind of focus of attention when we talk about radioactive hazards. And of that spent fuel, it's the fission products that are the most kind of dangerous part of the radioactivity. About 3-4% of high-level waste or spent fuel. And then you have actinides and transuranics, which are a little bit longer lived, but not as dangerous as fission products. A couple words about the deep geological repositories. The whole idea is basically barriers, open barriers. So you start with solid waste pellets. It's not a liquid or a gas. Solid, it stays where you put it. It's not going anywhere by its own force. It's not leaking. You pack that in a zirconium rods in assemblies, which are the same thing that you use in the nuclear reactor, which is then put into cast iron canister, which is the one on the right in the picture. That is put into copper capsule, which is one on the left. It's then put into a hole that's 400-500 meters underground. That hole is then filled with bentonite clay, and then the whole tunnel system is filled with bentonite pellets. And in the end, it's closed with a giant concrete plug. So there's a lot of barriers that are not dependent on each other. So if one fails, eventually they will fail. The next will stop the radioactivity from getting out. So it's basically something that has multiple levels that all slow down the release of any radioactivity. I made there's more than 60 years of civilian rad waste management, and I made a graph on the number of fatalities from spent fuel management. Here is the cumulative number. So that I'm aware of, there is 0 fatalities from current waste management, which does not include the DGRs, the repositories themselves. So we've been very successful and very careful in managing. And DGRs are just the kind of next step in what is already an extremely safe way to do waste management. This is not this informative graph is not in the study itself. I made it just for you guys. Even though I think we might have time, I'm not going to read through all of these. I know there's a lot of text here. There's a couple key points. Finland started its first research reactor in the 60s. And the kind of too long didn't read version of this is that there was very real pressure to find a solution ever since we started planning and constructing nuclear reactors in the 70s. But everybody assumed, including governments, politicians, and the industry, that it would be exported and perhaps reprocessed. So that was the kind of common knowledge and the main strategy. In 80s, there started to show this plan B for direct disposal in the documentation. But yeah, the pressure was real. Olkiluoto 1 and 2, when they came online, they only got operation license for 5 years because they had to prove that they are progressing in getting this disposal done. And then, well, they studied the international market, and that was a seller's market, so the prices were upfront and very high. And even then it was a little bit uncertain if you can ever deliver the waste to those sellers of these services. So year by year, decade by decade, that became clearer and clearer. In 95, DeepGEO did its first study, and they identified more than 100 potential sites for DGR in Finland. 1.85 million euros in 2022 currency. They did stuff much cheaper back in the days. Nowadays you could maybe, well, do almost nothing with that money. Then they focused studies on 5 different sites. They get another 10 years of operations license. And until 1991, the ministry had the prime strategy as exporting the spent fuel. But at that point, they made a complete U-turn that said that, okay, you're not progressing with your export strategy. You're not having any contracts with any sellers of those services. Then you have to do it somehow else, and that's direct disposal in Finland. And then, yeah, it made a 180 turn for Finland. And and in 1995, before we joined European Union, just as a precaution, we kind of decided to make a law that it's illegal to export or import spent fuel. Because there was some people who were against joining up European Union, and they were using this as an argument that, okay, if we join European Union, then the European countries will come and dump their waste here in Finland. Everybody knew that that's ridiculous, that's not going to happen. But just to kind of shut up these critics, we put this law that, okay, importing spent fuel is illegal. And since importing was, then it made also sense to make it illegal to export as well. Then Posiva was started in 95. We had an overwhelming national and local political acceptance for the Onkalo, the first DGR. So Parliament agreed, voting 159 to 3 in favor. And even the Eurajoki, which is the site host, also voted 74% majority to host the site. In 2004 we started mining, and 2010 Posiva got to 400 meters. They applied for operations license in 2021 for the encapsulation facility and the DGR. And yeah, operations will start 2025, maybe 2026, who knows? It's the nuclear industry after all. Depends a little bit on Stuk, I guess, as well. They're reviewing, the paper must be pushed before license is obtained. Right, so the addressable markets, it's large but uncertain. These are European countries, and wherever you see a question mark, there is uncertainty what is the kind of law and policy in importing or exporting spent fuel. So we don't actually know which countries could even do this, either side. We know that in Finland it's currently not possible. There's a clear law against it, but many other nations are having kind of uncertainty around it. And many of these nations also follow this dual track approach, which means that they have a domestic program that is progressing slowly but surely, but they also keep an eye out for multinational programs that could take the thing ahead. Globally, there is about 460,000 tons of high-level waste, and it grows around 10,000 tons per year. There was this recent South Australian study that estimated they could take about 130,000 tons by 2090. So from that, and also from the growing pile, of course, that was before we had this nuclear renaissance that is probably, likely, hopefully now happening. So that might grow. The revenue for the project that was estimated to last for 120 years was 257 billion Australian dollars, with an average profit for each of those 120 years of around 1 billion. And South Australia population is 1.8 million, and it's 3 times larger than Finland. So that's just to give you the kind of context. Some select the European countries, how much spent fuel they have and how much they have in their funds. Some of these sums include decommissioning funds as well, so it's not just waste repositories. But one of the kind of interesting things about this topic is that the funds often already exist. So they don't have to come from a government budget or be a political 10-year fight somewhere, but there's actually a fund that's being collected by the nuclear industry because it has been behaving responsibly and according to law. And then you're supposed to use that money for this. So the funds exist. And the cost of spent fuel management, there's a kind of consensus that disposal cost is roughly $1 per gram or 1 million per ton, plus minus something depending on the size of the project. So the bigger the better. This does enjoy the benefit of scale. So if you have a large project, it's cheaper than that, and if you have a tiny project, it can cost you a lot. That 40% is maybe an underestimation. For example, the Denmark project, that they have a tiny amount of waste, and now they have a program that's going to run for like 80 years, and then they decide what to do it or something like that. It's quite spectacular when you get into the policies and reasoning behind these programs. There is also this estimated willingness to pay. So how much would a country be willing to pay, or a utility be willing to pay for somebody to take the waste? And that's speculative because nobody has done this, but the willingness to pay that they found in this 2016 study it was a wide range, but maybe the kind of medians were between 1 to 2 million per ton. In certain cases, it can be 10 times higher than that, but that's the kind of median range. So if you get paid $2 per gram and can store it for 60 cents, it's a quite healthy margin for other stuff. Okay, so the case for commercial multinational DGRs. I kind of asked this question a lot of the countries and politicians and responsible people say that it's the responsible thing to do to personally take care of the dangerous waste you create. Like each country should take care of the waste they make. But what is actually the responsible thing to do? Is it that, or is it the thing that you hire a professional to take care of that waste? So I have 3 kids. Let's assume that they make some radioactive waste at home, or maybe toxic waste, or whatever kids do. Is it responsible for me to go there as an amateur without proper equipment to clean that up, or should I call my cleaner and say that, okay, come, please take care of it? I think there's different levels of responsibility. And buying a service is often a responsible thing to do. Let's go through the significant issues with multinational DGRs. I guess the message from that picture is that if you just say no to nuclear waste, it will somehow disappear or be taken care of by somebody else. I mean, they look happy enough. I think they are Canadians, so why not? So there's pretty much no technical issues. We know how to do it. We have multiple ways how to do it in a safe way. We know that it doesn't cost too much. It's a couple % of the cost of nuclear electricity to take care of it. There's pretty much no public health issues. It's extremely safe. The environmental footprint is tiny because it's underground. You only have the access, and then you dig underground, so there's pretty much no environmental land footprint. There is some legal and contractual issues, like we saw in the previous slide. There's a lot of uncertainty around this, so there must be some negotiations and contracts and agreements and all this kind of stuff. But the main issues are political and public acceptance related. Some of the people I've been talking to, for example, express this fear that, okay, tourism in Finland will suffer if we become the dump for the rest of the world. There's reputational harm. And this is often this kind of also this general fear, uncertainty and doubt that people have. They just don't know about what nuclear waste is, and they are probably not interested. They just have this image of the leaking green goo in The Simpsons and all that stuff. So that's the main issue, and that has been the main issue in the multiple times in the history that we have tried to do this. And actually one way to kind of maybe do it differently and to solve it, at least how we did it in Finland, is to go to the community and grow it from there instead of this kind of, the government designates a place and then everybody gets up in arms and opposes the project because it's coming from the top. That approach has a 100% failure rate. Going from the ground up has a smaller failure rate. I guess it might not work every time, but it has worked. Right, what are the local and state benefits? Well, you have jobs. There's Steve Jobs, but also jobs. You have socioeconomic benefits from this infrastructure investment and businesses, education, and diverse people move into the areas. You get taxes, both from property and from those jobs. And in addition to the kind of reputational harm that some people this might cause, there's also reputation and influence in the positive sense, at least in the global, especially nuclear community, but also wider community as a responsible global participant. And of course, you could get new kinds of tourism. For example, I hear that there's a lot of visitors going to Onkalo. It's fully booked. They should make an amusement park or something like that around it, kind of gather all of the benefits. Some of the benefits: central DGRs are a safer, or can be a safer and more proliferation resistant solution. So you don't have multiple sites all around, but instead have one central site that you can manage professionally. It decreased the cost, so the economic benefits are significant. There was a study done Zapier 2 in Europe that calculated at least 30% cost reductions compared to individual DGRs. And when you have a large inventory of spent fuel, that incentivizes you to do further research and development into, for example, reprocessing and breeder reactor programs. So, for example, in Finland, we only will have a couple thousand tons of spent fuel. I think Onkalo is licensed for 6,500. With such a small amount, it doesn't make any sense to start researching these things because the upfront investments are enormous. But if we grow that tenfold, then it suddenly might make sense, because you have a lot more of the stuff you will be reprocessing or feeding into your breeder reactors. Then there's the wider benefits for nuclear industry, the climate and people in general. If you have a DGR, it will probably improve the public acceptance. Some people here in Finland have been a little bit worried that having a multinational repository here in Finland will decrease the public acceptance. I can see that some people might feel that that's not a good thing. But on the other hand, you have all the benefits, and when people realize those benefits, then it might also increase. But for sure, for the global nuclear community, this will be a plus in the public acceptance. You could get lower cost of financing, for example, in the EU taxonomy and the general ESG. And these lower costs of financing for your nuclear reactor program can actually more than pay for the repository service. So if you get 2-3% cheaper financing, you can use that saving to buy the service. So it's actually not costing you anything, and probably you end up making more money than you pay for the service. And in general, it makes it easier to deploy new projects. We get more new nuclear, more reliable energy systems. We get less emissions, more energy and prosperity, better health, cleaner environment, better resilience to disruptions, for example, climate change caused. And nuclear technology contributes in one way or another into all of the sustainable development goals. Here's a very busy graph. It's a kind of matrix on all the levels that you can have the benefits. So in the middle, there's the local community around that. There's the host country. There's the international nuclear community, and then the planet and ecosystems, and the whole human experiment. A lot of potential benefits. Let's talk a little bit about the business cases. How are we doing? Great. So even without changing the legislation, we could do a DGR for the domestic SMRs that we are planning now. So those reactor projects will need to have a solution for their spent fuel even before they get their construction license. Which is a little bit premature, but that's how the law is now. Because it's several decades into the future before they actually need that. But I mean, I guess it's very responsible. You could have low level or intermediate level storages, even those cause some problems in many countries. You could also take red waste from research reactors and medical and industrial. I use Denmark as one example. In the study, they have a tiny amount of radioactive waste, and they are spending huge amounts of money to wonder what they're going to do with it. Wouldn't it be simpler to pack it into a canister and send it here and put it into Onkala? Poland is another one. They have a research reactor. They used to send it the spent fuel back to Russia, I think, but they are not doing that since Ukraine, so now they are stuck with the stuff. And yes, they will have their own nuclear program, but their waste repository is far, far away in the future. And the main market is just selling DGR services for spent fuels from another country. That's like the biggest by far. And then in the future, we could see these type of opportunities that you could enable this nuclear energy as a service type of business models. So you have a lot of the reactor developers are thinking about selling nuclear energy as a service, but to do that, they still need to handle the waste. And currently the situation is such that wherever you produce the waste, the country, they need to take care of that. So if you sell somebody nuclear energy as a service, they still need to take the waste and do something about it. It would be a much better package to sell the whole package. That okay, you don't have to take the waste. We have a partner here in Finland or somewhere else who takes care of the waste, and you just get the clean energy and the prosperity that it enables. And the last chapter, future of spent fuel. This is kind of the key question. We've been talking about waste, but it's a matter of definition. Some countries have defined spent fuel as an asset. We have it defined as a waste, which means that it's a problem and we need to pay to take care of it. But it could be also an asset because there's roughly 95% of the potential energy still left. You just need some new technologies to get to that. And if you have a large spent fuel inventory, then it kind of changes your calculation on whether you would like to explore reprocessing and breeder reactors and what else we could do with it. So that's an opportunity, especially if we do get a lot of spent fuel into Finland or somewhere else becomes available. And these are under serious development. I've talked with a couple advanced reactor vendors or developers, and they are planning to have commercial solutions in the 2030s. Even if that's postponed by 10 years, it's still a blink of an eye in the kind of spent fuel management timeline, because spent fuel is managed in the kind of thousands of years time scale. So a decade, 10 years, 20 years is not that much. There's the case for waste in Finland. So we are forerunners. We are the first one to enter, to have a domestic DGR up and running. We have 2 billion year old stable bedrock. If you played Minecraft, you know that bedrock is very hard. We are a stable democracy that almost nobody lives here, so there's plenty of space. There's high public acceptance of nuclear in general, and we've been able to solve the political problem of the repository as well. For the domestic, we have a lot of the top expertise in all the relevant industries for this, but it's prohibited by law. So it's clear that the law needs to change pretty much as first thing. And it will not change by itself. People need to act and talk. We need to have a public discussion, and we need to have demand from society and stakeholders to the legislators that, okay, we want this changed. We would like to see lobbying from the industry as well. both current nuclear industry in Finland or new participants in that. And I'd say we also need political initiative and courage. Because it's a controversial topic. It doesn't have to be, but we've made it into one. And that's it. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we can have a Q&A. Taina will take the questions.
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Laura Salonga. I'm from DeepGEO. And I just had one question. I was curious about this, actually. I was researching before coming here, and I could not find it easily online. You talked about the benefits of hosting a DGR for the local community. And I was curious for the DGR that's already been implemented here in Finland, in addition to job creation, infrastructure investment, et cetera, are there other specific benefits that community is getting?
It's too bad we don't have anybody from. Please.
I'm not from Posiva, so I'm from the Stuk from the Safety Authority. I know a few ones. There are, for example, the real estate tax in Finland goes to the community compared to, like, for example, in Sweden. As far as I understood, it goes to the state. So it goes to the community, and for nuclear facilities, it's higher compared to the other real estate. And then it's based on the volume of the building. So for example, nuclear power plants and disposal facilities are fairly big. So there are different
Is the whole
No, I think it's the open part, or I think they will try to optimize it somehow. But how I see it, it's the kind of yearly, really well. You can estimate kind of in the future how much you would get, and it's long lasting, and it's not something that the government would pay one time or something like that. And maybe you don't get the feeling that the government would give you money so that you take the waste. So it comes from the facility. So there might be some kind of psychological issues on that. But that's one thing that comes from the system. Of course, then the jobs and everything.
And one of the interesting points in that was, from what I know, there was actually competition to get the repository, and surprise, surprise, it was the two nuclear communities in Loviisa and Olkiluoto that were competing to get the repository. So they saw the benefits. They were already familiar with nuclear. It just makes it easier. Some more questions?
Yes, did anyone have? Okay.
So, Thomas Jam from Copenhagen Atomics. I have a question. So this whole thing about nuclear waste, you showed that there's never been any death from it. There has been other death from not handling radioactive materials in a correct way in Russia and other places, but not nuclear waste that you correctly pointed out. But I think what is really happening here is a psychological game, and you also touched on it. This is not about facts and reality. This is sort of a psychological games between different human groups, and they're hammering each other in the head with these words they are saying. And do you think we will evolve to a society that can handle these kind of debates in a logical way, or do you think we will keep on playing these psychological games with each other, sort of in infinity?
That's a great question. It tells you something about Finland that we have managed to solve this. We have evolved as a society. I guess Finland, for example, is a good place for this because we are engineering and facts-focused people, kind of as a nation, maybe compared to some other nations. So that place, but that's a good description. It's not about what the fact is. It's about this kind of who yells the loudest and gets the most attention and maybe gets the juiciest headline or quote or clever sign in your demonstration. Whatever we do, there's always going to be opposition. But I would say that there's certain stuff that we still need to try to do. because otherwise doesn't make any sense being human and progressing. Any further? We could have a 5-minute. Oh, there's a question. Okay, one more.
We have 2.
Okay, so what's the difference between radioactive waste and nuclear waste, like causing environmental damage? Like somebody just said that radioactive material has caused problems in environment in some countries.
From a radiological perspective, radioactivity is radioactivity, but from a perception perspective, nuclear radiation has a special place in people's heart. They're much more afraid of it than of any other type of radiation. So there's again this kind of what we think versus what are the facts. I guess the other types of radiological materials that Thomas was pointing to was, for example, when we had, or the other countries in the world had the nuclear weapons programs, for example, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they did a lot of crazy shit. Some people got hurt, but that as such doesn't have anything to do with the civilian nuclear industry. So while I'm talking about showing the graph that how much radioactive waste from nuclear energy has hurt people, that means the civilian nuclear energy, not the kind of, for example, the nuclear weapons manufacturing. There's been also some, there's actually a great book about the whole history of radioactive accidents. I think that's the name of the book. Atomic accidents or something like that. There's some crazy stuff that had been happening with, for example, medical waste and stuff like that. People have been stealing medical waste, extremely radioactive medical waste, and then just dying there somewhere. And of course, you had the assassination in the UK a while ago with a radioactive substance and stuff like that. So it is harmful, but the nuclear energy industry has been managing it very well.
Did we have one more?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Olli Soppela from Miditi, and actually 2 questions. Do you want them both now or
depends
one by
on
one?
the first one.
Well, let's go with the first one. First is about the business models. You mentioned that if we change the law and we allow this kind of repositories to be built, that's one step, of course, but then the devil is in the details. I see 3 ways that we could go forward. One is free competition. Anyone can dig holes and ask for licenses from Stuk. One is that is government-led monopoly, and one is that it's a private monopoly. So which one of these paths do you think is most likely at the moment? If
there's actually an appendix in the end of the report that discusses these kind of various ownership models and their kind of benefits and issues. One point to make is that even if we allow this activity, at least currently the nuclear law in Finland prohibits you from building a nuclear facility, which a DGR is, unless you get this decision in principle from the government and parliament. So even if we remove the kind of import-export ban from the legislation, it doesn't mean that we just start popping up repositories everywhere. It's still under political control. But that makes it possible for people to make a feasibility study and invest in that and think about it as a business opportunity. Because now it's illegal. Nobody dares to think about it or talk about it. But yeah, that... For example, the South Australian study assumed that it will be fully government-owned, their kind of program. They saw that as the only viable option. It needs the state government as the owner to ensure this political support. On the other hand, we have Posiva, which is fully privately owned here in Finland. And you could perhaps also have a mixture where there is public ownership and private ownership, where you could, I mean, because, I'm not gonna go into too much detail on the pros and cons, but yeah, there's some into each choices, and maybe we can try to find a most sensible way forward. Did you have a second question?
Yes, thanks for the answer. The second question is about, you had a list of countries that some of them had restrictions in exporting and importing, and some didn't have. Do you have a list in mind of countries which would be the most feasible partners for this kind of business if it was progressed somewhere in the future?
I guess since we are in Europe, then it would make sense to start from Europe, in European Union. Belgium, Netherlands, Estonia, Poland as newcomer countries. Denmark for their tiny thing. Yeah, it's hard to say because nobody has been offering this type of service. How many countries would be willing to take up on the offer? But yeah, many are still looking at the dual track thing, that they are looking for multinational solutions as well as a domestic one. So that alone says that they are interested in getting rid of the domestic DGR program and going for something else.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, so we could have a small 5-minute break, or do we have time?
Yeah, I think it's now 5 o'clock, and the next part of our great seminar will start the international discussion. You can go to the toilet if you need and stuff like that, or just take a breath of fresh air. But we will continue in a couple minutes. There is one question there.
Okay.
Oh, that's free. Yeah, thank you, sponsors.
Okay, hi everyone. Are we soon ready to start our part 2? We have a couple of interesting speeches coming up. First, we have Laura Salonga from DeepGEO. Did I pronounce it right? Laura has a diverse background of global experiences ranging from technology and healthcare to humanitarian aid, with a common thread of fostering transformative positive change. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in rural Thailand and humanitarian aid worker across Southeast Asia, and a leader at a large healthcare technology company in the US. She currently leads DeepGEO's industry relationships from her home base in Massachusetts. In addition to her role at DeepGEO, she's a mother of 3 young children, with the eldest Anderson was in the audience. Heard that he already left. A yoga teacher in training and a student of the outer and inner worlds. Please welcome Laura.
Thank you, Taina. And use that too. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. He's actually back in the room, so even though there was no singing or dancing, he's decided to rejoin. So happy to be here, grateful to be here. And I'm coming from DeepGEO, which is a startup company, although 10 plus years in the making. As we know, the nuclear industry moves a bit slower than, for example, healthcare technology. And we are doing exactly what Rauli is presenting to Finland as a commercial opportunity. So I'll tell you a little bit about who we are and where we come from. I did have quite a few slides that I put in here as tentative to cover, depending on how much information Rauli provided in the previous session. And the good news is I can skip over some of them because we've already heard a lot about what the current global challenge is. We know that there is significant nuclear power today, and it's expected to grow. The one thing I didn't hear Rauli mention, although he alluded to it, is that at the COP28 conference in December of last year, there were a number of countries, 20 plus, that committed to supporting the tripling of nuclear power globally by 2050. So the projection for the growth in both nuclear energy and, of course, then spent nuclear fuel is significant. A little higher. Great, thank you. Okay. And so here are a lot of the numbers that, again, Rauli already shared, so I won't go over it in detail. The fact is that even if there were no nuclear after today, there is a significant backlog of spent nuclear fuel that needs management. Again, deep geological repositories covered in the last session. The one thing I'll add is that the IAEA has determined and had determined even decades ago that many multinational deep geological repositories will likely be needed. So now the business opportunity. We know the market size, we know it's growing, and again, if unaddressed, which aside from Finland, which is a beacon of hope for, I think, the entire world and its progress with a deep geological repository, there could be 750,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel by 2050 if nothing is done. Part of the problem is that there are countries that don't have sufficient geology, or, as Rauli mentioned in the last session, don't have significant volume of waste to be disposed of to make it economically viable to develop a deep geological repository for themselves. So we estimate that 65% of the current market either doesn't have a plan or they shouldn't or couldn't have a plan for their own domestic DGR. Again, much of this was covered, so I'm going to stay really high level, but we do see this as being a significant opportunity for a commercial enterprise. It solves a number of problems, and in 2029, the predicted revenue could be $2 billion a year. And we saw in the previous session that the South Australians had estimated it being $1 million in revenue per year, and so that our projections are that it would be even higher. Now, DeepGEO comes in, and this is an image of a multinational, oh, that's not the right one. Sorry, that's not the one that was supposed to be in there, but I'll go back. The multinational repository, the very basic premise is that there is one country that's developing the spent nuclear fuel. It doesn't have, for example, the right geology for a repository. That fuel can be safely transported. Today, spent nuclear fuel is transported globally on a regular basis, and as Rauli pointed out, has an impeccable safety record, and transported to another country that does have the right geology, and that spent nuclear fuel can be stored safely. So now enter DeepGEO. DeepGEO was born in 2012 in the rugged hills of Labrador. This is actually a picture of a fishing village in Labrador, Canada. It has, as Rauli was speaking about earlier, population densities can vary significantly by location. The entire population of Labrador is 26,000 people, and it has hundreds and thousands of acres of land. Anyone know what the white picture is and white image is in the background there? Yeah, an iceberg. So Labrador is quite far north and in a remote area, and similar to Finland, has very stable billion-year-old bedrock. About in 2012, there was an eclectic group of fishermen, preachers, geologists, former miners who were up in Labrador. That's where they live, and they said, how can we revive this community? It had been a mining community, and the mining companies had left, and the area has been economically depressed and environmentally degraded since the mining operations ceased. And they said, what can we do in this sparsely populated area? We have deep expertise in mining, and we have this stable bedrock. Well, they came up with the idea of hosting multinational repositories. And they called Link Murray, whom I had hoped would be here. He's the founder of the company, DeepGEO, and unfortunately he's in Ghana. However, he has spent many years coming to Finland over the last decade to learn about this opportunity, and he's really grateful to many Finnish people. I don't know if anyone knows Tom Grönberg, and I may have pronounced his Tom Grönberg. I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, but he's learned from many great Finnish people. And was inspired by the Finnish and also by this community that was looking to heal their community economically and environmentally. And so he said, yeah, I will help you do this. He's been an entrepreneur in many other businesses, did not have a background in nuclear, but he did say, yes, I will help you with this. So we started with one community. As Rauli mentioned earlier, one of the key things for success in something like a deep geological repository is the community buy-in. And that's where we started, from the community. And what's amazing is Link is a very dynamic and personable person, and he's very well connected internationally. So Labrador was our first, and then some connections of his in Ghana heard about what he was doing. And they said, well, that's really interesting. That sounds like something that could be powerful for Ghana as well. Can we join? And so he went back to the Labradorians who had come up with the idea. And he said, look, Ghana, there's folks in Ghana who want to do this too. Is that okay? And they said, oh, sure, there's plenty of spent nuclear fuel. If they want to have a repository too, that's fine. So then Ghana joined. And then some connections of links from Somaliland said, well, actually, that sounds like a really tremendous opportunity for us too. We're interested. And so now we have 3 locations. In each of these locations, we have folks on site who come from the community and who have been building trust and relationships over the past, in Labrador, 10 plus years, and the other countries, 5 plus years. So at this stage, all 3 of these locations are interested. We're engaged at every level. The people, of course, because that's where it started. Also with, especially in Labrador, the indigenous leaders in Ghana, some of the ethnic kings that lead different parts of Ghana, and up to the highest levels of the government. We've also worked closely with Hatch Engineering to do pre-feasibility studies in all of these locations. They've all been deemed as feasible for deep geological repositories. And one of the key things that we found makes this opportunity especially compelling is that for the communities where we will work is that we are committed to developing an investment trust fund using a significant portion of our revenues. So we'll get those disposal fees from the customer countries. We'll pay all the operational costs. And then the balance of the revenue goes to investment trust funds that will be used for 3 purposes. The first is to invest in sustainable development in the host region. The next is to invest in the customer country. This could be, for example, in contracting with them for services, and then investment in nuclear infrastructure. I've talked through the timeline. Here's just a visual for you, and the high-level summary is, we were born in the community. Link and the growing team spent many years learning about the industry, building relationships, and now we're at the stage where we're building partnerships, formalizing the relationships. So community and provincial MOUs, national MOUs, and then just recently in March, an agreement with AFCON, the African Commission on Nuclear Energy, is what the IAEA is to the UN. And AFCON is to the African Union. So they're responsible for the development of peaceful uses of nuclear energy in Africa. And the agreement that we have with AFCON is to both develop the governance needed in Africa, because many countries are newcomer countries, including especially Somaliland, but also Ghana, and also financing nuclear. I just earlier mentioned COP28. Many countries agreed that they were going to support the growth of nuclear energy. We know it's critical to get to a carbon-free future, that Africa, which is going to be 25% of the world's population in 2050, also transitions to nuclear energy. It's absolutely critical, but there's two things they need. They need the governance and they need financing to actually implement the nuclear. So those are two things that we will be working on really closely with AFCON. And I think the agreement with AFCON is powerful because the African countries are doing this for themselves, and it's twofold. This is Enobot Agbora. He is the leader of AFCON, and this is Link Murray, the founder and president of DeepGEO. I actually took this picture. We were in Cape Town, South Africa for the Energy Indaba, and we kind of formalized the partnership. But what Eno said is that this opportunity of working with DeepGEO is going to allow African countries to leapfrog the rest of the developed world. Again, except for Finland, countries have been producing nuclear fuel, spent nuclear fuel, for decades, and they have not solved the waste problem. Africa, which is embarking on nuclear energy, with the exception of countries that already have it, like South Africa, and they can leapfrog the rest of the world and say, as we implement our nuclear, we're already going to have a solution for our waste. And then we'll open that solution up to the rest of the world that hasn't solved for it yet. And by doing so, we'll generate the revenue that can fuel our nuclear energy growth. So they are in complete favor of this and really excited about this opportunity. And Link, as I mentioned, is in Ghana. We're actually hosting a conference just next week with many of the leaders across Africa who are embarking on nuclear energy, and we'll be doing more workshopping around how to bring this ANEFI agreement to life. So really exciting things happening across DeepGEO. The other reason he's not here is because, as I mentioned in the timeline, we're focused on right now on formalizing partnerships that will build the capabilities that will need to be successful as we continue to develop. So there will be hopefully some more announcements coming very soon about partnerships that will strengthen us. So this is just two more slides. This one here just gives that forward-looking view. We're right now just finishing up our Series A, which has been that community engagement that's been happening for 10 plus years. We're actually already working on our Series B funding so that we can then get the licensing that's required for sites, the regulatory processes, the engineering, the construction of both an interim storage and the beginning of a deep geological repository. We're hoping to start by the early 2030s and start to receive those first shipments before we even have a repository, but just in the interim storage. I heard a question in the audience earlier, who are the potential customers? And certainly, if Finland were to pursue this, it of course makes sense that there would be European customers targeted first. We're in conversation with some other potential customers where there actually is a lot of time pressure. Some countries, they could continue to store their spent nuclear fuel for decades without a solution. There are other countries that are actually running out of space. If they want their nuclear programs to continue, they need to have a solution for the waste. And so our goal is to be ready as quickly as possible, at least with the interim storage, because of course, as you all know, building a repository actually takes quite a number of years. So that's a quick summary of where we're at, and I'll just leave on this is the last slide, just a quote from Elizabeth Nyamayaro, the former executive director for the UN Women, that no one is equal until we are all equal, and our potential should not be limited by where we are born, nor our dreams be diminished by our current circumstances. And I think this is really representative of the driving force behind DeepGEO, which is that we really want to empower places that have historically been left behind of economic opportunity and enabling them to take those opportunities. So that's a summary of DeepGEO. Thanks so much for the time. Do we do any questions right now, or?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so next we have Marja Vuorio from ERDO Association. Marja got her doctor's in science in chemical engineering, physical chemistry from Helsinki University of Technology, presently the Aalto University. She then worked 14 years in Posiva, Finland, in projects on long-term safety issues related to geological disposal, performance assessment, and safety casework. In 2019, she joined Covra in the Netherlands, working mainly in international collaboration projects. Since 2021, she has led the ERDO Association Secretariat. Please, Marja Vuorio.
Thank you. So, okay, thank you. So Rauli asked me to briefly tell about the shared repositories developments in Europe, and well, many of the pros or cons in Europe have already been mentioned in the global scale. So I will go a bit faster on some parts of the presentation. So why do we need multinational solutions? What is ERDO and ERDO's evolution to date? Then a little bit about EC's activities on multinational solutions. What are the paths to multinational repository? And then summary. So why do we need multinational solution for geological disposal? There are many countries with very small inventories of highly active waste, and that needs to be safely disposed of. And when the inventories are scattered on ground storage places all over Europe, in this case, that is a certain risk. In case we could all have a joint repository solution and dispose them all in one place. Geological disposal is at the moment the solution to go to for all nuclear fuel cycles, and and especially these small nuclear programs, it is not economic a way to deal with the waste. As mentioned before, there's economics for scale. So larger the inventory is, then the price per unit comes down in the costs. So advantages are economies of scale, earlier access to the disposal facilities, enhance for global nuclear security. So this is also advantage for those larger or advanced nuclear programs which can deal with their nuclear waste on their own. It is also their benefit, to that all the countries can find solution for their wastes. Increased technical opportunities for all and business opportunity for the host country. So ERDO, the abbreviation ERDO comes from European Repository Development Organization. And we are association. Our mission is to work together and jointly work, and those are topics we find difficult in our nation's waste management disposal or managing in general. And our aim is in the end to enable to at least one shared European multinational waste solution. And ERDO members to date come from 7 countries, or 9 organizations, waste management organizations and research organizations. So our members come from Slovenia, Netherlands, Denmark, Italy, Croatia, Norway, Belgium. So those are the possible, maybe the interested parties if Finland will have a multinational repository. There are also other countries who have been interested in ERDO membership, but due to the political issues in their home country, they haven't been able to join. So in ERDO, all the members have their ministries backing on being a member of ERDO. In other countries, like in Austria, they haven't been able to get that. So these sub-year projects were already mentioned earlier by Rauli. So these were EU-funded programs which studied feasibility of multinational repositories early 2000. So feasibility and what would be the suitable implementation strategy. After EU funding finished, some of the countries involved in these studies decided to found ERDO working group. And at that stage, the scope of ERDO widened from just disposal, all waste management solutions. And 2021, ERDO was founded as an association, so we have now kind of more official stand than just a working group. And how ERDO approaches this, we are working on shared solutions, so we are all putting in kind an effort to work jointly towards that. There are also other options how to do it, like Belgium has promised to take Luxembourg radioactive waste. That's an add-on solution. And as already mentioned earlier, it is very important to have a dual track, which means that each of the ERDO members also work on their national waste management solutions, so they don't rely only the possibility that someone else will provide some solutions. So all of the ERDO members also have a national program on waste disposal. And how European Commission approached on a multinational solution. So there is a resolution which calls member states to study the technical, economic and political feasibility of the creation of international repositories. And like mentioned earlier, the political part is the trickiest one here. So the sub-year projects were funded 2003, 2009. Then there's a waste directive, which allows that if there is agreement between member states, then other states can take over other ones' waste. This end of this month, the ERDO project will finish. That's EC has funded a lot of waste disposal studies, and one part of that has also been studies about shared solutions in Europe. And at the moment, there is ongoing Harper's project with the studies, harmonized practices, regulations and standards in waste management and decommissioning, and that could provide really big help towards shared solutions. So there are two parts to multinational repository. First, policy and strategy path. So engagement of politicians, citing decisions, engagement of the general public, and then there is a research and development path. So far, ERDO has mostly worked on the RD&D path, so we have worked on waste acceptance criteria, technical solutions like deep borehole disposal, and waste characterization methods. And the logic behind this dual track policy that each nation also needs to have their own national program is that you can't, of course, rely on someone else. But if the multinational solution actually works in the end, there are clear advantages, lower costs, more choices of possible locations, pooling of technical capacity, personnel and facilities, and especially for smaller European countries, this is very important point. And then diversification of disposal per waste type. So in the Netherlands, for example, we have a wide variety of wastes, and if we go for national solution, all that will go into one disposal facility. If we manage to get multinational solution, then there could be separate high-level, low-level waste repositories. Of course, there are disadvantages like longer distances for transporting the waste, but that has been done before. Deviating national legislation and definitions, but there are already some projects working on those. And yeah, each nation has different timetables for their programs and variety of location from where the waste will be delivered. So to conclude, there has been increasing open recognition in the countries, the benefits of multinational repository. So there have been several international studies. I've only concentrated here on European level one, but IAEA, for example, has also addressed this topic in several reports, as well as also NEA has done that. Easy Waste Directive support this kind of solution. Dual track policy, it's credible approach, so you have backup plan if this doesn't work, and then the technical research for both national and international solution will be the same pretty much, so that doesn't really add so much extra cost on technical research. It does add some work on the political decisions part. ERDO's approach has been that collaboration starts pre-disposal, so that's why we already have joint projects on these pre-disposal topics like waste acceptance criteria. And then finally, there is a really important role for IAEA, EC, and NEA. Those big organizations and forum, they provide platforms for ERDO members, also some other small inventory member states where we can promote this topic and have discussions. So if you have any questions afterwards about ERDO or what we do, my contact info is there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will actually join us remotely. We have Berta Picamal from Nucleareurope.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So again, thank you to Rauli first and the whole team for welcoming me. Despite that I'm not physically in Helsinki, I'm in my home country, Spain, that has decided to phase out nuclear. And despite what people think, in Spain, it doesn't always, the sun not always shines. So it is raining nowadays. And the wind is not blowing. So I don't know exactly how people here are going to be doing it when we will have, as from 2035, all nuclear reactors closed down. But that will be in another discussion, an interesting one. My name is Berta Picamal, and I am the DG Office Legal and International Relations Director at Nucleareurope. And I wanted to explain to you a little bit what Nucleareurope is and does. So the next slide, please. Basically, we are the lobbying organization. We represent the European nuclear industry in the Brussels scene, so in all energy policy discussions that are taking place in the European Commission, Parliament, but also with the member states, which are the representatives in the European Council. But lately, we have expanded a lot more our discussions with other key stakeholders that are also based in Brussels, that need the electricity that we're producing from the nuclear power plants in the whole of the European Union. So I've heard it from Rauli and from the other speakers afterwards, the interest of the European Union at large on nuclear is growing. To be honest, I don't like calling it renaissance of the nuclear industry or the nuclear energy, because I have already gone through another renaissance and it didn't really go well. So I like using another word, which is revival of the nuclear. So it sounds better, at least for my ears. The next slide, please. We are composed of national associations, so 15 European members. And I insist on European and not EU, because you will see flags from Switzerland, from the UK, no longer in the European Union, and also from Ukraine, all of them operating nuclear reactors, except one that you see here also is the Italian Nuclear Association. And as you know, there were 4 reactors in Italy, and some years ago they decided to phase out. So they do have decommissioning and waste management activities ongoing, but not production of electricity with those 4 reactors. The next slide, please. Likewise, we have an increased number of corporate members that have joined Nucleareurope lately. Most of them are because they do not have a national association representing them in their own countries, but they decided that they needed to be part of the broader discussion at the EU level. Next slide. Probably this slide is known to you, but it just is kind of a reminder, what does nuclear contribute in EU's economy? It's basically nowadays 100 nuclear reactors in operation in the EU that represent 1 million jobs. And when we say 1 million jobs, please do understand this as direct, indirect, and induced jobs. So it's not 1 million people working in nuclear reactors and nuclear power plants, but it's the large concept of jobs in the EU's economy, with 100 billion turnover a year. And a figure that it's a lot forgotten in the European debate is that nuclear produces a quarter of the electricity in the European Union. The next slide. And again, something that is forgotten, it's almost 50% of the low carbon electricity produced in the Union. Next slide. We do have a challenge ahead of us. The next slide. And this is how I translate this challenge, is this energy trilemma. We need to secure affordable and available energy, which is green and clean, and that it's reliable for households and also the industry. We're talking a lot about the competitiveness of the European industry at large, not the nuclear industry, but the European industry. So intensive users, for example, that need these 24 hours, 7 days, the whole year round energy to be able to continue working on their own businesses. And this is something that nuclear can provide. So this base load electricity that is not dependent from the weather like we have now in Spain, for example. The next slide. That is a slide that I've taken from a study that we have recently contributed to, which is the prospects for development of the small modular reactors in the European Union. But this does not mean that only small modular reactors will need to fill in the needs to decarbonize that we need. So, for example, I'm only going to focus on this electricity side of it. So we will need to have 1,600 terawatt hours a year of low carbon electricity that needs to be deployed by 2040. So in those, we have to count the existing fleet. So those 100 reactors that we have nowadays need to still be operating. So there needs to be a policy that supports the long-term operation of the existing fleet, a new deployment of large reactors, and also the massive deployment of the SMRs, which stands for small modular reactors, that we understand using the nowadays technology, so most likely light water reactors, but also a large fleet of advanced modular reactors which use other types of technologies. Likewise, we are only talking about electricity, but there are a lot of other sectors that will also need to have the input from nuclear, which is hydrogen, industrial heat, and district heating. And Rauli was showing some of the books that he wrote some years ago, and I remember reading the first one about this district heating in Helsinki. So I think that there is a growing need for nuclear also for other applications that are not the usual ones that we know, which is the electricity production. Next slide, please. And we are witnessing a political shift on nuclear within the European Union. Next slide. The political changes in the European Union are quite visible. It's a challenge, but we're seeing how many countries at EU level have announced plans to invest or to continue using the nuclear energy. And this is just a list. And many other countries that used to oppose are no longer opposing. And in some cases, like Italy, and not long ago, I was in a meeting of the G7 countries that were meeting in Italy, where Italy was now openly supporting development of nuclear energy also for their own country. So there is indeed a changing trends in the European Union, at least from the EU member states. We will have to see what happens after the European elections to the Parliament, and also when the European Commission changes, which is expected to be happening towards the end of this year. The next slide, please. That is a very important step that has been taken place, which is this European Nuclear Alliance of the member states. So this alliance was born some years ago, but it did not have the same impact as it has today. But since last year, I would say, since February 2023, when they first met in Sweden during the presidency of Sweden in the European Union, they have been meeting several times. And that is where they decided that at EU level, they are aiming at having 150 gigawatts installed capacity for 2050 compared to the 100 installed capacity that we have nowadays. These inserts also to what was mentioned also by previous speakers about tripling the capacity of the world in nuclear that was announced in this net zero nuclear initiative announced at the COP28 in Dubai in November last year. So there is a trend, there is a move, there is conversations going on everywhere on the need for a continued and expanded use of nuclear energy. And the financing is going to be key. The development of the skilled workforce is going to be key. We need to scale up the industrial capacity, so all the supply chain will need to be up to the task. But of course, there is no question of imposing to anybody the use of nuclear energy. But I also would like to very much concur on what was said before. Some of those countries that used to have nuclear energy that have decided to phase out, they are still nuclear countries because they have waste to manage. And this is the speech of today, and the speeches of today go in that sense. The next slide, please. When we talk about waste, as I said, that all countries having used nuclear for electricity production, but also for other applications, have waste to manage. And the problem that we face nowadays is not a technical problem, is not a technological problem. It is an acceptance from the policymakers and the general public. So there is a long history of misconception and misunderstanding, which is leading to, thank you. Can I have the slide where I was talking about? Previous one. Previous one. Here. Okay. So I was saying that this long story of misconception and misunderstanding has led to an overall rejection of nuclear energy. Even if it is changing, there is still a lot of things to do. And I'd like to share with you a history that has happened to me several times, but the most crying one, I would say, is meeting with European Parliament members some years ago. And there was this lady that was very interested in knowing more about nuclear energy at large, but also about waste management. And she literally asked me, but Berta, do we have enough ground below us to be able to store that amount of waste that we're creating with the use of nuclear energy? So there I realized, okay, there is a very big task of engaging with the policymakers that in the end will also have a word with their own national people when they go back to their countries. If they think that the amounts of waste is so huge that Europe doesn't have enough ground below our feet to store it, then we're lost. So we had to start with very basic information being shared. And the volumes are key to make people understand what are we talking about when we talk about waste. As I said, the changes are operating, but we're still a long way ahead. And the political decisions need to be taken because we've seen it, and Finland is the good pupil here, is that technical solutions are ready to be implemented. So it's basically our job to make policymakers change so that they can take decisions which will no longer be considered as dangerous for the next mandates if they want to be kept in power, but all the contrary, like decisions that they are taking, which are responsible decisions for their own population. The IAEA, and it has also been said and quoted here, from an international point of view, the safety of geological disposal is widely accepted amongst the technical community, and a number of countries have now decided to move forward with this option. So it is embedded in many people's minds that the deep geological repositories are the way forward. And also, back in 2011, with this EU Council directive, which is the framework for the responsible and safe management of spent fuel and radioactive waste, deep geological disposal represents the safest and the most suitable option as the end point of the management of high-level waste, I would add, and spent fuel. Next slide, please. In the EU, and the colleague from ERDO has explained it before. They are doing a great job discussing among themselves about what can be done jointly. But as of today, the directive as such requires member states to have national programs that take into account their own national, I would say, plans, because they fear that if discussions only on shared repositories was taking place, they would take away the responsibilities of each one of the governments. So it was kind of not a wait and see policy, but just already do something while at the same time discussing jointly with other member states about the possibilities for shared repositories. So in the end, we see that 16 member countries with nuclear programs, only 15 have to develop those plans for deep geological repositories, but only 3 have demonstrated concrete steps towards the implementation of such facilities. One is the country where you are, Finland, France, and Sweden. And I'm only focusing on EU countries because the other presenters have mentioned Switzerland, obviously, and also Canada. But let's say that if we stay within the context of the European Union, those 3 that I'm mentioning are the ones that are the most advanced. The information comes from this European Commission second report on the progress of implementation of the directive, which is dated already almost 5 years ago because it was released in December 2019. So I know that they are working on the third report, which is still not out. And that's a timeline that you see in this second progress report on the implementation of the directive. So with different timelines, and Finland expecting 2024, so this is this year, but maybe it will be next year. So we do hope that the solution that we have for the waste that doesn't have to be seen as a problem, because it is not. It is a challenge indeed, but not a problem, and member states are taking the right steps toward managing it. In the end, as a lobbyist that I am, when I have to speak about waste issues, I want to recall and to explain to people that the nuclear industry is basically the only industry that is taking care of its waste. The rest, most of the time, is what we're breathing. The next slide, please. As far as EU shared repositories, again, this quote from the directive says it very clearly. Some member states consider that the sharing of facilities for spent fuel and radioactive waste management, including disposal facilities, is a potentially beneficial, safe, and cost-effective option when based on an agreement between the member states concerned. That opens the door for member states to be able to share the repository. The discussions have been taking place since years, if not decades, and the possibility for shared repositories, especially for those countries, and it has also been mentioned, with small modular programs, which volumes of the high-level waste and spent fuel are smaller, is the most desired way to go. But now it's time to turn words into action. And the proposal that is being presented today by Rauli, we hope that it will really see the light, the sooner, the better. Next slide. I think that was the last one. Yes. So thank you again, Rauli. Thank you, the team, for inviting me, inviting us, Nuclear Europe. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
We will have the panel discussion after a couple more presentations, so I hope you stay online for that, Berta.
I am online. It's a day off today, but I'm here. It's very interesting, so I will stay for the panel, of course.
Thanks.
Okay, we will continue with the speeches. And first, next we have Christian Sjölander, Kärnfull Next. Christian is the co-founder and CEO of Kärnfull Next, part of Kärnfull Group. A company decided to project development for SMRs in the Nordics. With a strong background in finance and a passion for sustainable energy, Sjölander has positioned Kärnfull Next at the forefront of the energy transition movement. Under his leadership, the company focuses on developing new business models for SMR nuclear reactors with financeability and deliverability at the forefront. I'm so sorry. Kärnfull Group was voted most innovative startup at the 2023 World Nuclear Expedition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rauli, for inviting me to speak a little bit about the business side of these things. We are a project developer, one of the few project developers in Europe when it comes to new nuclear. We've been at this for about 5 years, 3 years more dedicated in Sweden. We are currently running a full nuclear program in the south of Sweden. We have completed or are completing feasibility studies at a handful of different locations, focusing now mainly on light water reactor technologies, and that poses some very interesting questions in relation to most things that are kind of set up in Sweden to limit the progress of nuclear, and waste being one of them. So let's talk about Sweden and the history of nuclear. So in Sweden, as most of you know, we've had a proud legacy of nuclear. We started in the 50s, developed a lot during the 60s, and we started building in late 60s, early 70s, and then we ended building in the early 80s. We had plans for many, many reactors in Sweden, but in the end, we ended up with the kernel plan for 12 large-scale reactors, and after that, we had a referendum in the early 80s that voted for the closure of all nuclear in Sweden. And we've been living with that kind of hanging over our heads for the last 40 years. Nuclear has always been a kind of a proud memory for Sweden, but we've never shown love to it. So from our side, if we were proposing to build new nuclear in Sweden, we had to address several problems. One of them being the public perception. The public perception, I'll just keep talking and maybe, yeah, you can fix the technical side of things. All right. So the public perception was really a problem in Sweden. We had a problem that no one showed love for nuclear. As soon as people started realizing the benefits of nuclear and stopped looking at the emotional side of nuclear, the public perception shifted, as it did here in Finland and as we're seeing now in Denmark as well. Public perception skyrocketed, and that posed a new question for us. You know, can we leverage this into a credible long-term business model? Nuclear in the past has never been about a business model. It's been about a state meeting another state, two presidents shaking hands, and decides to build nuclear. In order for nuclear to have renaissance, and in order for nuclear to actually be able to build out at the scale that we needed to do in order to meet the climate goals of 2050, we need to make sure that this doesn't turn into a state-to-state problem in the future. This has to be a boardroom decision problem. We need to address this by looking at different type of business models, different type of delivery models, but in order to do that, we need to unlock and have a level playing field. One of the key things was that for nuclear to be included in the EU taxonomy, as Rauli has also mentioned several times in the report, the cost of capital, that is one of the key drivers of the total cost on nuclear power plants. Unless you're in the EU taxonomy, it becomes prohibitive. It was very, very important for nuclear to be part of that. In order for us in Sweden to be eligible and aligned for the EU taxonomy, we had to have a final waste repository decision. And we had that decision in principle in 2022. So now we're both aligned and eligible for all nuclear projects starting in Sweden to be financed under the EU taxonomy or sustainable finance. That means that we have percentage points less of capital cost, and the pool of capital has grown 100-fold when it comes to financing nuclear and nuclear-related activities. We also have this more political side where we now have a fossil-free target in Sweden, and now we're putting, the dent into the other problems. All the other laws that has been erected over the last century in order for us not to be able to address these problems. We cannot in Sweden today think that we can actually contribute to the world in 2050 if we can't build new. The EU relies on us building about 10 gigawatts of the extra 50 gigawatts that needs to be built. We cannot do that in Sweden now. We have too many obstacles. But Sweden is on the path. We've started looking at this. The government has said that we will have 2.5 more gigawatts by 2035 and another 10 gigawatts until 2050. And in order to do that, we're turning every stone. We're trying to address this from a scale-up approach and not a build one nuclear reactor approach. So the government has launched 4 different special investigations looking at every bit and piece that today is kind of putting some form of road bump in the way of getting nuclear built in Sweden again. We've started looking at licensing, the fees related to licensing, the permitting process, the waste, and the emergency preparedness zones. So we have an expert group of 20 people doing that at the moment. We are one of them that is represented there. And it has to do with a lot of strange things. For instance, in contrast to how the regulator works in Finland, STUK, which has kind of an hourly rate that you pay for things. In Sweden, we pay per reactor. Paying for reactor is really, really good if you have a large reactor. Paying for a reactor when you have a small reactor is very bad. For instance, the licensing process in Sweden, it's about 90 million euros to get from a application to a commercially active operating reactor. So 90 million euros is a lot of money when it comes to just the licensing process. So all those things needs to be addressed, and the waste is certainly one of them. So the waste in Sweden is set up in pretty much the same system as we have here in Finland. We have a contributing system, but we also have a mandatory guarantee system in Sweden. In Finland, you're allowed as an operator or license holder to borrow against this facility. You can borrow back 85% of what you put in as collateral. In Sweden, you cannot. Meaning that the collateral I have to pose just by building a new reactor is almost the equivalent of the cost of the reactor. So unless I have a huge balance sheet, or if I look into other business models like SPV structures for building nuclear, that doesn't really have a balance sheet, it's almost impossible to be included in this type of waste system. So we need to look at business model in regards to waste as well. So waste as a service, where you actually pay for someone else to put up this collateral, or build it elsewhere is one of those avenues we think will unlock the actual potential and makes nuclear scale up in a much better way. So Sweden, as I said, we have a decision in principle. It's not built yet, of a waste repository in Östhammar kommun, the municipality in the eastern part of Sweden, just north of Stockholm. The operator and owner of this repository will be SKB, and SKB is a private company jointly owned by Uniper, Fortum, and Vattenfall. It's a legacy thing, but it poses great problems for the future, especially around competition. They are now in a position where they can actually exclude other actors from taking part in their final repository system. We know that this has kind of been an issue here with Posiva as well, especially when you're looking at the Fennevoima project in Hanhikivi. They had the same issue, that it's not very, very good for the nuclear industry if the final waste repository is using as a barrier of entry to the market. And if we are given access, how is this access priced? As it is now, it's a very black box monopoly type of pricing, and we know that monopoly type pricing doesn't give efficiency and potentially also give a societal deadweight loss. And in this sense, we will probably see that we would build less nuclear than we would if this was an open market for it. So we are proposing, and what we're looking at now in Sweden, is to set up, of course, another type of system. We need this to be set up as a public-private partnership or as a government-owned corporation, in the sense that we will not use it as a means of limiting other actors into the market. And hopefully, we can also reach a system where the state can provide the guarantees required for the operators for the lifetime of the final waste repository. It's a national problem, and hence they should be able to do something with that. And of course, we wholeheartedly agree with Rauli when it comes to opening up for import and export of nuclear materials and waste. It poses a very, very strange problem if we limit this, because then we have no way of actually addressing the almost idiosyncratic political risk that arises. That we as an operator, and we have built nuclear power plants, if someone does something in our host country with the final waste repository system or the laws around it, we have no out. We cannot do that, do anything about it. And for our investors, it's not a very, very good thing. We almost always look for optionalities when we do this. If we don't have options to do anything, it actually increases the risk, and increase in risk means higher cost of capital. And nuclear power plants gets more expensive and not built, and our energy sovereignty or the cost of energy goes up. So, to say a few final words, we need to address this on both a national level, on a pan-Europe level, but also on a global level, to make sure we get a system and a business model that actually lets nuclear be built in the future.
No niin. Thank you. And next we have Thomas Jan Pedersen, Copenhagen Atomics. Thomas Jan Pedersen is an entrepreneur, electrical engineer, software engineer, and nuclear engineer. He has 20 years of experience in cutting-edge technology development. He's a speaker, an author, and does advanced mathematical modeling. He also loves nature and sailboats. He co-founded Copenhagen Atomics and is now the chair of the board. After 10 years working in green energy, Thomas is still baffled by our society's general lack of knowledge on how energy is made, consumed, and how it shapes our societies. He sees thorium energy in general, in Copenhagen Atomics in particular, playing a rapidly growing part of our clean energy future. He is a man of action who believes that now is the time to take action. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Let's see how this works. Yeah. Yes. So a quick introduction to Copenhagen Atomics for those of you who don't know what we're doing. We got hooked on this idea of thorium as an energy source about 10 years ago, and we've been working on it ever since. Thorium is a metal. It's an alternative to uranium as a fuel. There's lots of thorium on this planet, and a ball that size can supply you with all the energy you need for your entire life, and the cost is roughly $100, so that's $1 per year for all your energy needs. But the problem is we need a machine or a reactor or something that can convert this ball into energy, and that does not exist yet, but we are working on it, and some other people are working on it as well. To understand what's the difference between uranium and thorium, there's a lot more thorium on this planet than there is uranium. About 3 or 4 times more thorium than uranium. But when we use uranium as an energy source, we're only using this little sliver, this uranium-235, and that today provides 5% of global energy. So there's approximately 1,000 times more thorium available to us than there is uranium-235. So it is a huge opportunity to use that as an energy source, and it's available in all countries of the world. But we don't even need to look at that because thorium gets out of the ground when we do mining for other materials, and we already do enough mining to cover all electricity consumption in the entire world, so we don't need to open one new mine. The best way I can sort of explain to you what is the difference between uranium reactors, all the reactors we have in the world today, and potential thorium reactors in the future is to make this comparison. I've looked up on the internet what is sort of the numbers, some of the numbers for solid fuel reactors all running on uranium. 60-year lifespan is typical. The price for enriched uranium is $4,500 per kilogram right now. From each one of those kilograms, you can get 1 to 2 gigawatt hours of thermal energy out of it, and it takes approximately, between 4 and 15 years to build a 1 gigawatt power plant, and the cost of electricity also varies a little bit, but I've put here $60 to $120 per megawatt hour. So if we compare that to thorium breeder reactors, which is what we're trying to construct, we have not succeeded in this yet, but as a comparison, the lifespan of the power plant is similar. The cost of fuel is significantly lower because it's thorium instead of enriched uranium. For every kilogram of thorium, you can get 22 gigawatt hours of thermal energy out of it. We believe that when we start building these power plants, a 1 gigawatt power plant will take between 6 and 18 months to build, and the cost of electricity will be significantly lower. And of course, that is the driver. That's why we do it, because if we can get the price of energy low enough, then people are not that much against nuclear energy anymore. And I've done the the calculation for you over there in the last column, so you don't have to do it in your head. And you can see that on several of these items, we are an order of magnitude better than classical nuclear energy. It's not that I think that we will stop using classical nuclear energy. I think we will continue to do that, but I want you to see thorium as an alternative or an addition to the market, because I think the energy market really needs to increase. And this is another option. So as a company, when we started the company 10 years ago, we decided we want to make mass manufacturing of nuclear reactors. And by that, we mean we want to make a factory that can make one reactor every day, not every year, every day. And it's actually not that difficult. We've studied that for a while. It's not that difficult to set up a factory that can make one reactor every day. The difficult part is supply supply lines, and also to get approvals to install one reactor every day, and to get approvals to get rid of the waste and all this stuff. So the approval problem is the big elephant in the room. Building all those reactors is not a problem, or I mean, it's a small part of it. A quick introduction to how we think we can manage this problem of building a company that can get to this. We spent the first 10 years on developing technology, and we more or less have that under control. Now we have started building full-scale reactor prototypes in our facility in Copenhagen. I have some pictures later on. Until now, we have built the first 2 reactors, and we are currently ordering components for the 3rd reactor. I don't think you've heard of any other startup company anywhere in the world that have built 3 reactors. So I should say that we don't have the approvals to start those reactors, and we only use them right now for sort of a non-fission testing. But this is the next step. We want to start getting approvals to start a real reactor, and I hope that we can start it somewhere in Scandinavia, but it's still a big question, which country can we actually be allowed to start this first reactor. We are in dialogue with a number of countries, and we actually just today met with the ministry here in Finland about the same. We believe that we can, if everything progresses in a great way, then we can start the first reactor in 2026. This is a test reactor, so it's not a commercial reactor. It's a test reactor that is supposed to show that molten salt reactors running on thorium actually works, and it's not a pipe dream. Once we've done that, then we will raise funding for making commercial reactors, and then once we've shown that the commercial reactors are working and they're providing energy at reasonable cost and they're not breaking down, then we expect to be able to raise enough money to start mass manufacturing, sort of build a gigafactory. That's milestone number 5. And then finally, milestone number 6 is a very, very, very important milestone for humans on this planet, and maybe on Mars as well. This is where we prove that we can actually make this reactor into a breeder reactor, because what happens when you convert it into breeder reactor is that then you get a much lower energy cost, you get much less waste, you get a huge benefit on sort of the scalability of the whole system, because you don't need enriched uranium or plutonium, anything like that. This is a picture of our factory facility, a workshop in Copenhagen. We have 11,000 square meters and roughly 76 employees right now. This is schematics of the reactor. I don't have time right now to go into all the details, but it kind of shows you that here in the middle there's the reactor core, the onion core, and there's a number of heat exchangers. There's a number of tanks at the bottom of the reactor, and there's a sort of a wall here that separates the hot section, which is 600 degrees warm, and then there's a cold section, which is just a room temperature, where we have water and other circuits. The whole thing fits inside a 40-foot shipping container. It's not a commercial shipping container. It's a specially built container, but it has the same form factor as a shipping container. And the reason that all of these great things are possible is because we've developed a new type of reactor core. We call that the onion core, and of course we've taken many patents on this. And the reason why it works so great is because we have 2 different circuits of molten salt. Here in the middle we have the fuel salt, which is the one that creates all the energy. And out here we have the blanket salt, which is made out of thorium. And then we have a lot of heavy water in between. And the heavy water is there to moderate the neutrons and make the neutron economy excellent. Then I think my next slide. This next slide explains a little bit. This is very nuclear engineering centric, but it tells you something about the neutron economy. I bet you've never seen any reactor developer anywhere in the world show neutron economy anything like this. This is superb neutron economy. For every fission, you have 2.35 neutrons available. And down here we have the thorium that captures the neutrons, and it converts into uranium-233. And then this is an example of a reactor that starts on spent fuel. So we take it's mostly, these blue colors are plutonium. So it's in the first, you can see down here, it's number of years. So in the first 5 years, a lot of the energy comes from the plutonium from the spent fuel, and that plutonium helps start up the fuel cycle. Eventually, you can see the plutonium burns away. There's almost nothing left, and then eventually the reactor will be running purely on thorium, and which is then converted into uranium-233, and this is what creates the energy. Over here, you can see how many kilograms there are of different substances inside the reactor over. This is only over 10 years, but you can see that there's almost 10 tons of thorium. You can see that the uranium builds up and the the plutonium are burned away. And there are a little bit of americium and californium and neptunium. But if you look out here, it's actually, it's a couple of kilos. So it's not, it's like 1% of the initial fuel load, or less than 1%. And eventually, we would have to take that last 1% of these long-lived actinides and burn them in some other reactor, potentially a fast reactor, or we could put them in deep geological storage. But what I'm showing here is that now we potentially have a reactor that can take spent nuclear fuel, remove 99% of the long-lived actinides, convert them into fission products, which only need to be stored for 300 years, and then at the same time we can get great fuel economy and much lower cost. This here is a picture of one of the test reactors that we currently have running in Copenhagen. And here's a picture from inside, how it looks inside. This is taken from the top in the hot section. Over here you can see the onion core. The onion core is roughly 2.5 meters in diameter. It's like a ball. And then there's a lot of pipes and here's some pumps and there's heat exchangers. And you can see that most of the things are constructed from stainless steel. And this is also one of the inventions we've done, or technology developments, is that we're actually able to build these molten salt reactors out of stainless steel for the most part, because we have figured out a way to manage the corrosion. Probably some of you know that molten salt reactors, these salts that we're using are highly corrosive at high temperatures, like 700 degrees. But this problem, we spent the first 10 years solving that, and we believe that we've solved it to a high enough degree that we can actually start building commercial reactors. Of course, we want to improve even further, but this is not one of the major problems anymore, at least for us. So that was a lot of slides, and I don't assume that you can remember all of this, but I hope if you talk to your neighbor or colleague tomorrow, then I hope you can remember these 3 things. We have created a new type of reactors that can create energy at lower cost than anything else, whether it's wind or solar or fusion or nuclear or coal, oil, gas. We can beat all of them on price because of this great neutron economy. Then Copenhagen Atomics wants to bring a new business model to the nuclear industry. We will finance, build, own, and operate the nuclear power plants. So the customer, we believe that most of our customers will be industrial customers that are making either ammonia or hydrogen or aluminum, things like that. And if you have an aluminum plant, you don't really, and you're sort of a chairman of the board or whatever, you don't really want to have the responsibility of owning and operating a nuclear power plant. You just want to make aluminum because that's what your company does. So we will take care of that thing. We will own and operate the nuclear power plant, and then we sell the heat to the customer, who is maybe an aluminum plant, and then they convert the heat into industrial heat or electricity or whatever it is that they need. And then finally, I talk about this thing with burning waste down here, that for every ton of waste that we can get access to, we can make 10 times more energy out of the spent nuclear fuel than what the amount of energy that was created with that fuel in the first place in the classical reactors. So now we have a sort of an energy multiplier because we can make 10 times more energy out of the same fuel that we already used once. And of course, there was a lot of dialogue before that. What does it cost to get rid of nuclear fuel? But I have a different proposal because I think spent nuclear fuel in the future will be more valuable than gold and diamonds. And we as a company have already created offers to some of the companies that we are willing to buy spent fuel at so transuranics. So when you buy spent fuel, you have to separate it before you can use it in our reactor. There's also, if you want to put it in fast reactors, or you call them breeder reactors, but no matter which reactor you want to use the fuel in, you have to do something about it. And we are willing to pay $1 million per kilogram of transuranics. And transuranics is sort of the worst part of the nuclear waste. So, I mean, there's already one company, at least in the world, that wants to pay for fuel. But of course, if somebody wants to pay us to take it, that would be great. Yeah, so I think I'll end here, and then I can take some questions, or maybe that's afterwards.
Can I get the presenters to sit there? We'll have the panel discussion. I have a bunch of questions here. Wonderful presentations. I hope my technical handicaps didn't ruin it for you guys. I've learned one thing, and maybe you have also. If you're ever running a hybrid seminar, don't hire us to do it for you. But yeah, forge ahead, as the saying goes. So we'll have about 25 minutes on this. I have a bunch of questions, and if there's questions from the audience, we'll check those too as well. Maybe I come here. Okay, so you already have a question. Yeah, if it's a good one.
Actually, it relates to this last Copenhagen atomics presentation. So, if all this is true, it's kind of what we are doing here. This kind of becomes pointless. No, but I was just going to ask, like, what is the most pertinent scientific or engineering hurdle still ahead? Like, what's the key scientific or engineering problem that has to be solved before we get to the commercial level? So I tried to kind of understand it through, but maybe I didn't.
Yes, so I don't think there's any significant scientific challenges, but there's definitely challenges towards getting all of this approved. So some of the things we run into is, okay, so molten salt reactors have never been approved before. So all the different countries, we talk to the regulators, they say, oh, we don't know how to approve that. Because all our description and documentation, they talk about high pressure circuits and spent fuel storage facilities and like all the things we don't have. And they don't know how to approve it. I think it will happen eventually, but it will be a roadblock or a bump. Next kind of problem is that, okay, so if we don't succeed as a company, then there will be some waste, obviously. What are we going to do about that? Oh, we don't know how to handle that waste form because it's a new waste form. So nobody, you are not allowed to start any reactor before it has been researched and agreed how we can handle the waste form. And that's like, okay, so it's not really a technical problem to build a reactor. It's all these political and approval problems that keeps on coming up. And there are other companies that have a solution for how to store molten salt fuel in a waste form, but that has not been approved because it has never been tried, and it's like the hen and the egg problem. So I don't think there's any scientific problems, but there's definitely a whole host of sort of political or I'll call it political problems, but it's we need a lot of social engineering to solve that.
Thanks. Okay, let's get back to the multinational repositories. I want to ask Laura. I guess I mentioned this in my presentation as well, but there's a long history of tried and failed multinational DGR projects. What do you think that DeepGEO has special? What do you bring to this to make it actually succeed? There's a small.
Does this work? Yeah. Okay, great. I will answer that question. And before that, I heard the second part, Sanfred, of your question was that if Copenhagen Atomics and other companies like them are successful, then maybe a deep geological repository is no longer necessary. And I wanted to say that actually they will still be. Like what I heard you say, and based on the studies I've done, is that there will still be some high-level waste that will need a repository for 300 plus years.
Maybe put the mic a little bit closer.
Closer? Okay, sorry. I was doing that during the presentation too. And then to your question, why do we think we're in a position to succeed? I think the core thing is something that I covered in the presentation, which is that we're community-led. We're coming from the bottom up. And you said it in your presentation too, previous attempts have failed and they've been top down. So we were born out of the community, and every community where we've expanded our locations to has come from them as well. So I think that's the number one thing that's propelling us. The second thing is the innovative business model. So like I mentioned, the investment trust fund not only provides us with a tremendous amount of security and extra insurance if anything does go wrong, but also it's meant to empower both the customer countries and the host countries in ways that are really attractive.
Great, and I guess that's kind of speaking, you have the trust fund structure there. If you think about the ethical questions are something that pop into people's mind whenever you mention this topic, is that okay, how do you do it ethically? You have projects going in Africa and in Canada, maybe elsewhere in the future. How do you ensure that this kind of thinking doesn't grow too big, that no, it's unethical? How do you ensure that it's actually done in an ethical way?
Yes. So just for example, with the investment trust funds, the community will be community-led trust funds in each of the host communities. So they will have a say in where that money's going. And for those who don't know Link, he often refers to the Quaker principles of decision-making, which is that, for example, if there are 7 members of this community trust fund, and some of them are members of representatives from DeepGEO, some are from the community. If 6 are in favor of investing in, say, something related to health in the community, and 1 isn't, they won't move forward unless that 1 says, I don't support it, but I'm also not going to object. But there's going to be really tight controls within these community trust funds to make sure that the money's going to the right places and that the community has a say. So it's one piece of it. And there's others, but in the interest of time, I'll...
Yeah, thanks. Let's go to the non-profit side, or non-commercial. You've been working with this scene for quite a long time, Marja. What have been the main challenges in promoting a non-commercial, like shared multinational repository?
Even though we are on,
okay,
nyt se on vissiin tarpeeksi lähellä. So we have tried to engage our governments and ministries to put more effort on this, because we do need, even though each ERDO member is backed by our ministries to work on this, but we also do need our ministries to work together to get some joint agreements on this national level. So it's not enough just waste management organizations and research organizations to work on this. We also need national level engagement to advance in this.
And well, public acceptability must be a big factor in there as well. What do you see would be the main differences between commercial and non-commercial disposal projects when it comes to public acceptability, and maybe the political kind of governments working together aspect?
Well, I think whether it's commercial or non-commercial, public will be mostly interested in how safe it is for them. So that probably is the most important topics which will be discussed. And the second one is what are the benefits for the host location. I think from that aspects both can serve the purpose, just slightly different models of handling the things. For politicians, well, it's hard for me to talk for them, but it might be different aspects than when they are making the decision and risks. So who will take the final responsibility of the repository all these years ahead?
Yeah, I guess like with also nuclear energy projects, they are so long time and the political cycle is not very long. So the decisions that you take a personal risk for, you don't necessarily get to benefit, although all the people in your nation would benefit from them long term. So yeah, there's a social engineering has to be done on political side as well. Berta, are you still online?
I am, but it's very difficult to follow what you're saying in the panel.
Oh, you're not hearing me?
I hear you, but as if you were down in Onkalo.
Maybe I am. Okay, well...
Tell me.
I want to ask you a question. Can you see a future where we have multiple commercial repositories around the world, and when buying these services is a common everyday practice with nuclear countries, existing and new ones? Can you see that type of future happening in the next, let's say, 20 years?
Yes, I would like to.
Thank you.
I would like to say yes, but 20 years seems a little bit too close, unfortunately, because history in our industry has shown that apart from, and I said it in my presentation, apart from 3 countries at EU level, I insist, that have advanced on waste management and deep geological repositories for their own countries, the rest are still well behind the what is an obligation in the end by law, both at EU level and national level to get it done. And I insist on the fact that it's not a question of technical issues, it's the political will that it's still missing and it's lacking. So while ideally, and especially because of the small nuclear programs in many of the EU member states and even globally, the logics would make it that we choose this solution, I'm afraid that it will not be as easy as we think or as we would like to, because of the lack of the political will of countries, of governments. So if it has been difficult to decide on a national own program, I think that it's not going to be as easy to find a shared repository for the country that is going to be having to host it. And it was mentioned before, I don't know which one of the presenters was mentioning, ERDO, yes, ERDO. Mario was mentioning that Belgium would agree or has agreed in principle to take the waste from Luxembourg. As you know, Luxembourg doesn't have a nuclear power plant nor a reactor operating, but does have waste from other applications. That is very good news. But first of all, Belgium should have a repository to be able to say, I'm taking up on your waste. And while there are studies still ongoing, and we know about the SCK-SEN project in Mol in the north of the country, there's still no deep geological repository to be able to take whomever's other waste on board. So I see it more as an issue for us to convince the policymakers that they need to take a decision now in order to be able to implement those solutions that exist, both nationally and on shared repositories.
How ready do you think that the European Commission is to kind of for commercial disposal services to become available? Are they thinking about this? There's been a lot of shift into the good side on nuclear in general, but how's the spent fuel discussion in Brussels?
Okay, so I think that I heard about the opinion of the European Commission. Is that right that you were asking, Rauli?
Yes. Yeah. Is the European Commission ready for commercial DGRs?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so the European Commission, when it comes to discussing about nuclear in general, they always say that it's up to the member states to decide what they want to do, while they have to respect the legislation that is in place. So I have not heard them pronouncing themselves about a commercial concept for deep geological repositories. What they continue saying, and this is basically what it was translated in the directive of 2011, and I have been in this business since 2004, so I've seen this being developed, that we insisted, and we had it opened for the directive to contemplate the possibility for shared repositories. That was discussed in the context of ENEF. I don't know if you have ever heard about ENEF, the European Nuclear Energy Forum that had a working group dealing with waste management. And in that context, we insisted on the fact that we needed to have a directive that contemplated the possibility for shared repositories. That is when, because this ENEF thing started in 2007, and 5 years later, we had the directive that came up with this article contemplating the shared repositories. Now, since many years, I have been asking the Commission, okay, this is a directive which is dated 13 years ago now. It's about time that is revised, reviewed, to take into account other realities. Why not then including this concept of commercial repositories? Something that we could eventually discuss with the Commission. But as of today, they stick to what the law says. And this is the one that we have from 2011.
Right, thank you. Let's go to the commercial side. I guess I'll ask this from both of you, Thomas and Christian. And you did mention this a bit in your presentation as well. How do you see a commercial DGR operator could help deploy nuclear power faster in Europe and maybe even globally? How could it help you guys drive your mission?
I think first and foremost, it's a de-risking thing.
De-risking.
Yeah, nuclear is defined by risk in many aspects, and waste is an open-ended. We call it the open parenthesis in Sweden, which is a risk we have to deal with. And the sooner we can have kind of a final decision or a final solution to a business model around waste, the sooner we can get on actually building it. A lot of capital that is kind of ESG compliant and looks to the EU taxonomy for its directions, still voice concerns about the nuclear waste problem, even though it's a solved problem in Sweden, just for the sake of it being kind of a state-run program in this case.
And Thomas?
Yeah, so I think in order to be able to build anything nuclear, you have to show that if the worst accident or the worst bankruptcy or whatever happens, then you still need to have a solution, a waste route. And I think as a company, we find it highly likely that we will pay for an option that we will probably never use, but just to have the option of a final depository or a final storage if there is some problem. We are actually willing to pay for that. So we're paying for something we don't expect to ever. It's an option that we never expect to call. But in order to be allowed to build things, and we need that option to be available. And I think also because of this suggestion that we have, where we will actually reduce the amount of waste and convert most of it into fission product, which needs to be stored for a much shorter amount of time. I think in reality we only need 3 or 4 deep geological repositories in the world, but all the different companies, even if we scale to 10 times as much nuclear energy as what we have today, all those companies scaling all that nuclear energy, they need to show that there is an option to get rid of it. So I think we will not end up putting very much underground, but there will still be a business of just selling those options to nuclear companies, because otherwise they cannot be allowed to build anything.
Right. And you do have to do something with the fission products as well, so maybe just put them.
Yeah, but fission products, in our case, we store the fission products for the first 100 years, and then we will hand them over to the local country, the host country, where the energy is produced. And by that time, 90% of the radioactivity is already gone, and there's only 10% of radioactivity left in the fission products. And it would be crazy to put them deep underground. I mean, you would just store that above ground like they do in the Netherlands. They have sort of just one building where they put stuff like that inside. So I don't think we will ever put that underground. I also think in 20, 30 years from now, there will be companies that will try to mine those fission products and get valuable special rare earth materials out of it. So I don't think it'll be, I think it'll be recycled eventually.
Given that you can actually use spent fuel as your fuel, you would maybe consider leasing the fuel from somebody who has a lot, has not put it underground yet. You would lease it and then maybe return the fission products after.
I guarantee you, by the end of this century, if we put spent fuel, real spent fuel with plutonium inside of it, if we put that in deep geological storage, I guarantee you we will dig it up again, 100% sure, because it's really, really valuable, and we know exactly where it's located. So it's cheaper to just get it up again from where it was than to try to find new enriched uranium or like.
Interesting. Any questions from the audience? Petrus?
Hey, thanks. It's super interesting. I was just wondering about this ERDO. So there were 9 countries progressive in Europe who were planning this multinational repository. So I didn't see anything about Finland there. Obviously, you're from Finland, but I think Finland at least could contribute to the R&D very much. So I was just wondering why, even if Finland doesn't want to join in a multinational repository, shouldn't we be part of this ERDO to help them design it faster, implement it faster?
I think it's precisely the political reason there isn't anyone from Finland in ERDO. So it could be considered a highly delicate matter, sensitive matter in Finland.
And Olli?
Thank you. A question about if, let's say, 3 EU member states decide to make a multinational repository, is there some other organization, some EU body or IAEA or some agreement or convention or something that would prevent those member states making this agreement together?
No, there isn't nothing which prevents them to make such an agreement. I think, well, inside EU, no.
Great. So let's move to the third part. And thank you for the panelists. Yeah, big hand. Put it on the chair because otherwise, yeah. And we have the final part, which is the Finnish stakeholders. We have a couple presentations, and I'll let the hostess do her job instead of me.
Yes, first we have Juhani Hyvärinen from LUT University. To give some highlights, Dr. Juhani Hyvärinen works as professor of modeling in nuclear engineering and head of energy technology department in LUT University Lappeenranta. He has been with LUT since 2013, and his current focus is on small modular reactor SMRs and micro modular reactor MMR safety and licensing and overall safety for reactors and waste management. Before LUT, he worked as the chief nuclear officer in Fennovoima for 6 years, and before that he worked at Stuck for 18 years in expert and management roles. Please, Johanna.
Well, thank you, Taina, and good evening, everybody, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation. This is a very interesting topic and very interesting forum, and unfortunately, I have the sun shining in my eyes through the door, and our official brand color is black on the screen, so it's not necessarily the brightest choice from our communications department. But anyway, a couple of, let's say, independent points. Many of the things that I'm going to say have already probably been said today, but let's go through one more time. Is this acceptable? Is a multinational or commercial waste disposal facility something that would be acceptable? Well, yes. There is the fundamental principle that you have to take responsibility of your actions, but you don't have to do everything by yourself, as already was pointed out by Rauli. Then there is the next question that if I don't do it, then who will? Is it in the nation's interest where this is done? And this would be a political question, definitely, and it would be, in our case at least, for the parliament to decide. We are a democracy, and it's a good societal system. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. And of course, those of us who want to promote these type of things need then to convince the parliamentarians that this is a good idea. And that's how politics works. Is this in the local interest? So the facility has to be located somewhere, and it's not going to be in the cellar of the Parliament House. It's going to be somewhere else. And the municipality and the region hosting this kind of repository have to be interested in it, and they have to like the idea. And this very much depends on who benefits of the facility in the end. In Finland, it has already been pointed out today that we have a municipal tax, infrastructure tax that goes to the municipality, and this guarantees benefits to the affected municipality. This is a generic positive feature for all infrastructure projects. It's not limited to nuclear by any means. It's an attraction factor for wind parks and solar parks and other things that are detrimental to the energy system as a whole. I should not be saying it, but it's getting late. So who benefits and who benefits the most? So people are ready, people are cooperative, so the human being is fundamentally good. That's at least what I believe. And I think has been proven also by some societal studies and studies in human behavior. But there is a little bit of selfishness as well inside us, and people are willing to cooperate and they are willing to help each other if there is a benefit to themselves. But then there is the envy factor also. So that if somebody else benefits of this activity more than I do, then maybe it's not such a good thing. Now, is it safe? That's the next question. Safety has been raised already today a couple of times. And this is a tricky question. I've been bothering my former colleagues at the regulators every now and then by asking that, what exactly do you mean when you say safe? Or when you insist that something must be safe? And it's far from trivial question to answer. Promoters of safety often wish to be conservative, and at least in the case of the KBS3 disposal scheme that's being implemented in the Nordic countries, in Finland, and will be implemented in Sweden also, is overly conservative. So it has been knowingly designed to overestimate all the, among other things, the potential radiation doses, and using very stringent exposure limits. So these stringent exposure limits derive from the ALARA principle, which is an old idea from radiation protection and comes from the times when you could easily control all the artificial radiation doses, but it completely neglects the fact that the natural background radiation varies quite a lot. It also ignores the fact that in Finland, at least the second most dangerous form of radiation is UV from the sun. So don't go outdoors if you are concerned about your health risks due to radiation. Better stay indoors, especially this time of the year. Come winter, then you can go out again when it's dark. Reasonable people, reasonable lay people out there expect that experts judge all risks with more or less similar metrics. This is a point that was made by Malcolm Grimstone long time ago already, that lay people actually, when they consider that nuclear engineers and the nuclear business are fools, have a point. They have a point because we overdo things, and we don't. Society and nuclear industry and radiation protection community don't judge all risks with similar metrics. We overemphasize the radiation risks quite a lot. And Malcolm's point was that if something is presented as so dangerous that it must be buried 0.5 kilometer deep for 100,000 years, it must be really horrible stuff. So the mankind does not treat anything else. None of the dangerous wastes that we live with and deal with in that way. So nothing else gets treated like that. So this treatment in itself is evidence that this stuff is terribly dangerous. How dangerous exactly this is, I tried asking this question among people who should have been informed, and I was told that it's very nasty. Don't sleep next to a disposal canister, and I wanted to find out in more detail what makes it so dangerous for such a long time, and then I was told that why don't you read some of the POSIVA reports. So I tried reading the reports. I found some numbers, but I did not find the background of the numbers, so I had to go back to older reports, and then eventually I came up with that picture there. And there is the reference to the POSIVA report number as well. And from that picture you can read that after 1,000 years or so, this spent fuel is still very dangerous to you if you grind it to very fine dust and then inhale that dust. Okay. That's what you have to do. Otherwise, it won't be able to harm you. Even if it dissolves into your drinking water and you drink it, radiation is not going to harm you that badly. The heavy metal effect may be the chemical effect, but not radiation. And not to mention external doses. But it takes a lot of effort from a somewhat educated person such as myself, who has been trying to figure these things out for many years now, to understand what the hell this is actually doing to you, and what sort of assumptions have been made in order to come to the conclusion that this stuff is terribly dangerous to you for millennia to come. Now, here is my answer to the question that what does safe mean? It's comfortable feeling that somebody has things under control. And this brings me back to the earlier discussions that we had today about how decisions are made. And I respectfully submit that all decisions that humans make are based on feelings. Everything is based on the feeling that you have. Some of us get a good feeling out of logical reasoning. Okay. And some of us get a good feeling by looking at somebody who is ostensibly an expert in his business and looks credible and talks in a convincing fashion. And this is how I make decisions about things that I don't understand, such as medical stuff or genetically engineered foods. Is it safe to eat GM tomatoes? I have no idea. I have no personal idea. I have no qualifications to make that decision myself. But looking into what credible people who have studied those things are saying and how the digestion system works and so on, it's probably not going to cause my limbs to fall off or me to grow a third eye if I eat a GM tomato. So it's not dangerous to my health. Now, the last question, is the method any good? And somehow I'm a bit surprised that we've spent so long, several hours, discussing disposal of spent fuel and nobody mentioning the deep boreholes yet. So I need to do this. I definitely need to do this before, because this method that's being implemented by Posiva, this is for all practical purposes a very robust way of isolating radioactive waste from biosphere. This is a kind of reverse mine. It moves stuff from the biosphere back to geosphere, and it's not makes it inaccessible to us for a very, very long time. So it's a very good way of doing this, but it's an overkill, and it's very expensive. The biggest cost factor is moving rock. A little bit surprising maybe, but that copper is cheaper than moving those millions of cubic meters of rock back and forth. So I have been told. I did not check the numbers myself because I'm not good with money. But I've been so informed by credible experts. Now, newcomer countries such as Estonia or Norway seem to be already considering alternative methods, such as deep boreholes. And this is an attractive idea. Deep boreholes for geothermal heating have been tried in Finland, and it turns out that our bedrock is actually too good. It's a bit too hard and too strong to drill very deep, so perhaps this does not work that well in Finland after all. But maybe in other little bit softer geologies it might be the ideal way. A lot less mass to move around, much deeper disposal depth, much more robust isolation. Should be demonstratable at least. The only difference here is that this KBS3 is a mature concept. It has been developed for over 40 years now, and so the window is open now. So if now somebody wants to sell this idea and sell facilities utilizing this technology, time is now, because these alternative methods, they will catch up. They will emerge, and they will catch up. And so if we want to capitalize on our capacity to be as trailblazers in this business, the time is now. It has to be done now. So this concludes my points on the topic, and I'll be happy to hand over to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Juhani. I think we have the last presentation, right? So we have Suvi Karvonen from VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. Suvi Karvonen, Doctor of Science, works at VTT as a manager, operations, overseeing the nuclear safety-related research project portfolio, as well as acting as a director of the National Nuclear Safety and Waste Management Research Program, SAFER 2028. Her background is in engineering, physics, and energy-related research, especially long-term safety of nuclear waste management. Please, Suvi.
Thank you. an honor to be here and also an honor to be last, but I promise you I will be brief, so then we can get on to the good discussion at the end as well. So I thought I would maybe try to bring in a little bit of a research point of view and also maybe a little bit of an emotional point of view, because I agree with Juhani that all decisions are made more or less based on feelings or emotions at the end of the day, even if we try to apply a lot of logic. But what I just wanted to briefly talk to you about is why should we have an international repository? How should we have it? Where should we have it? And then present to you a vision of the beautiful future that my friends and family call delusions of grandeur, but I think it's realistic. So why international repository? I'm not going to go into global scale here, I'm just going to focus on Europe, and this is a map of Europe. And as you can see, we have many countries and a lot of borders. And I didn't actually find a very good picture, or I didn't even spend very much time looking for one that would have nuclear reactors. But there's reactors in many of these countries, and research reactors, and so on. And the concept for me that each of those countries with nuclear waste should have their own repository is completely absurd. It makes no sense, and I don't believe that it will ever happen because it's also economically so stupid at the end of the day. And also some countries will never have the political goodwill to do it. I also thought of having a picture with a population density, but I couldn't find a pretty one, so you will just have to see it in your mind's eye. But I can tell you that Finland is largely empty, which is great because then there's less NIMBYism to be had while choosing a place. But going back into the kind of I'm actually amazed that we have been talking this entire day and no one has been talking really about the time scale of the repository. So I'm happy that I get to present it in this presentation. So these are orders of magnitude. That means that I'm not claiming that you can build, prepare and construct a repository in 10 years. I'm saying it's in some decades. But that's the kind of time scale we're talking about. Then for operation, we're talking about centuries, maybe 1 century, maybe 2. And then for the post-closure safety, that is actually at the heart of acceptability and whether regulator will give permission to build these facilities, we are looking at thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And these are kind of time scales that are not easily understood by people because we are designed to understand days, weeks, months, years, maybe decades. And that's kind of where our imagination runs out. But to give you a kind of concept of what we're talking about, this preparation and construction, talking about decades, is pretty well corresponding to Posiva's project that has been going on since 70s in one way or another. And then if we talk about operation timeline, we are talking about birth of the nation. So Finland is a little bit over 100 years old now. And then if we are talking about post-closure safety, we are starting to think about large-scale geological and historical events such as ice ages. I think my personal favorite part of the Posiva safety case is discussing how does ice age impact radionuclide releases from the repository when we have 2 kilometers of ice above our heads. This is a great time to be concerned of the impact on the population. But just to go back to that operation time being in the range of centuries, this is Europe some 150 years ago. You can't actually see Finland in this picture because Finland is part of the periphery of the Russian Empire in this picture. But as you can see, the borderlines look quite different than in the other image. Of course, some countries look very similar. But what I'm trying to say here, I'm quite confident that if we could see 100 years or 150 years into the future, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about an international repository, that is how long it will operate, most likely. I am fairly sure that the map of Europe will look very different again. In one way or another, maybe we will have a European Union without those borderlines anymore. Maybe we will have something else. I don't know, but I think that making decisions now where to build the repositories based on the current borders is not smart. So that was about the why. Going on to the how, I would like to support what others have already said, that technical solutions exist and they can be applied to most geological environments in a safe manner. I'm not saying we should put a repository at the foot of a volcano in Italy, for example, but for most environments we can build a safe concept. And this safety is backed up by decades worth of research and science. We at VTT have been working on the Finnish program, for example, for several decades. And I'm quite confident in making this statement. And I really wish that maybe this event or something else will lead into public discussion on this topic, and that this discussion would then consider two things. What are the risks involved in operating a nuclear power plant where we have an ongoing chain reaction at all times when it's operating, versus a repository where we do not have a chain reaction and the waste is 500 meters below ground level. These two are not even comparable in risk levels, yet we are able to build nuclear power plants, but here we are discussing whether it's okay to build repositories. And then secondly, as someone already mentioned, nuclear is the only energy industry that is taking care of our waste, really. I would also like to add that we should consider the impact of local risks versus global consequences. So for nuclear, even if things go wrong, at the end of the day, that is the local consequence. And only a possibility. Whereas for, let's say, fossil fuel use, which we are still doing all the time, we are talking about certain global catastrophic consequences. So for this how, the main questions are political and societal, and I hope that perhaps the Green Party or some other people here today can come up with a way to solve those. Then finally, as to where, well, I think it should be here. Maybe in some other countries as well, but definitely here. We are a forerunner with the technology. We are unintentionally first in the world. We didn't mean to be originally, but everyone else stumbled on the way. So let's congratulate ourselves, pat ourselves on the back, and actually use this for something. Then secondly, and this is a point I would like to raise, is that if the only repository for high-level waste that we have is the Posiva repository for the next 100 years, it will be operating, maintaining expertise and competence inside Finland so that we actually, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we can tell what are these, how was this built, what are the principles, how is this operated safely. That is not a trivial question. Now, I know this is considered, Posiva has a plan, I don't want to throw shade on them in any way, but I am saying that having a second or a third repository operated here would greatly strengthen national competences and make it easier to obtain this kind of expertise that we need. Then I would also like to say that we have a stable society and a stable bedrock. These are two excellent qualities for a multinational repository country. And also I very much like that in Finland, the current repository that we have is in one of the most affluent areas of the country. We did not put it in northern Finland on some indigenous people, Sami people area. We did not put it in some previous in some poor area where nobody wants to live. No, it's in one of the most affluent, one of the wealthiest areas. So I think this is also something that we are the real thing. We are not putting it out of our minds in some neglected corner, and that's a very good thing. And then finally, acceptability. Well, this has already been discussed, but we have generally a high trust in authorities and science, low population density, and good experiences with nuclear. And these will all make the process of getting approval easier. But then finally, and this is what I really just want to bring into this discussion, is that I think we have an ethical responsibility to do this. We are currently in a climate crisis. and we need solutions. And if we in Finland can help, then we should help. This is one of the big obstacles for adopting nuclear, and if there's something we can do, then we really need to do it. And also the dollars or euros, we've talked about this a lot already, so I won't go into that anymore. But then finally, for the vision for the future. So I really hope that the previous presenters here with your plans for SMRs or serially produced reactors will be successful, and we will see decarbonation of electricity and heat production and a large-scale adoption of the technology. But for this to ever happen, we do need centralized commercial solutions for nuclear waste processing and disposal. And Finland, we are able to do this if we one day, I hope to see, we operate one of the largest international repositories in the world, and we'll be able to pay off our national debt and retire at least under 80, hopefully, one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the panel next, and there's going to be some people that haven't been represented yet. For example, there's Peppi Seppälä, is a municipal councillor in the city of Espoo and a councillor in the Wellbeing Services country of West Uusimaa. Earlier, Peppi was chair of the Young Greens of Finland. Before this, she worked as a consultant in the energy sector. Then we have Sunfrid Lindblom. Mr. Sunfrid Lindblom, Master of Science, BBA, has an extensive business management career in international industry and news media, currently managing energy sector business development project in Pyhäjoki Hanhikivi. And then we have Jussi Heinonen. Jussi Heinonen works at Finnish Radiation and Nuclear Safety Authority. He leads from STUC part the Renewal of Nuclear Energy Act and related safety regulation. Mr. Heinonen has a long experience in regulation of nuclear waste management and safety guards issues. He has been involved in regulating Posiva's disposal development almost 20 years. And Heinonen has also actively participated in several international activities, ABD groups in IAEA, NEA, and EC. And also we have the previous speakers, Laura Salonga as a moderator, and Juhani Hyvärinen, LUT, Suvi Karvonen, VTT, and Törmänen from WePlanet.
Okay, good. It's close to evening now, although unlike where I come from, still quite bright outside. So we're going to start with, my first question originally had been, let's talk a little bit more about the benefits, but I think we've heard a lot about the benefits today from varied perspectives. And so I'd like to actually talk about action. That's something, a theme that's come up a lot today is a lot of talk, decades of talk, not a lot of action. And Tom, you talked about the importance of action. You're action-oriented also. So let's focus on that. I'd like to hear from each of you what you think needs to happen next to make Finland as a location for a multinational repository possible. And maybe if we could start with you first, Professor Juhani.
Okay, thank you. I will just drop one thing, and that's that the Posiva facility needs to start operating, actually. It's almost there, but it's not quite there yet. And we need this operating demonstration that these things can be done. That's one thing. There are many others, but let's start with the beginning.
Great, thank you. Sanfrid, what do you think needs to happen?
Yes. A lot has been said already today, but just to add something, there is this, not in my backyard, phenomenon, as we all know, but I would say that there are many regions in Finland that would say that yes, in my backyard. Yes, in my backyard. And it's likely when we have a project that there will be a competition between some municipalities or regional areas who would like to compete for offering the kind of suitable location for this. So, and kind of coming from the side to this industry and listening through today, it really amazes me how much talk there has been and how many organizations. And to me, this is like, just get it done. I mean, what can there be? We have everything in the end-to-end process, and from the kind of municipality point of view, we would just need an external or commercial entity who is asking and then ready to go and have the dialogue. Because when we have somebody to ask the questions of the lawmakers, then we have the dialogue. So I think we need something concrete. So we should almost like stay here today after this and set up a foundation or whatever to have the dialogue with the lawmakers today.
Great, thank you so much. And we haven't met yet, but hello, Peppy, and welcome.
That was very small button. Thank you. I had a city council meeting, so I had a little bit late, but I'm currently running to European elections, so I think one of the first thing would be changing the international laws that you are not allowed to transport nuclear waste. So that would, of course, help this project quite a lot. But then I also feel that in larger context, the European discussion about nuclear energy has to become more positive, because even in Finland, if we are willing to accept nuclear waste, it doesn't mean other EU countries are allowing us to transport it. So I think that would demand that the other countries in EU would also be more supportive of nuclear waste and wouldn't see the transportation as the big risk, because it would probably demand that we go through countries that are not producing nuclear waste or storing it. So in that way, it would need quite a lot of support from countries that are not maybe part of this plan, or maybe some compensation or something. But I think biggest part is to have EU that is more acceptable for nuclear energy.
Great, thank you.
We're actually working on that, and I think that some countries might be actually relieved to get rid of the waste, because then that would kind of help the conversation in their country. Because it's really politically hard for them to have that happen there, so they might be actually relieved to get that solved some other way. I think what has to happen is an attitude change in Finland. I think we're too careful when it comes to a lot of things. It was funny, it said on one of the presentations that we were accidentally first, and I think that's very true, because we never aim to be the first in anything. We're like, let's wait and someone else does it first, and they learn from their mistakes, and then we can do it. But then we lose. I mean, we lose on a lot of things. We lose on a lot of money, like the time is now. And so I think we need to be more brave and actually try to be first in many things, not just this one. Also SMRs. I'm happy that we are progressing in that, but I think we need an attitude change as a country. Let's try to be first in many things. We can do it.
Wonderful, thank you. And
okay, so to keep it simple, like Juhani, what needs to happen is to change in law, and now it's to really create possibility to have influence, because the law is in renewal just now, and it will be, the plan is to have in the parliament in the beginning of 26 to be accepted by the parliament in 27 to be enforced in the 1st of January 28. So if you want to have an effect, it's a great possibility, because that law hasn't been renewed since 80s, so it's a big possibility. Then how to do it? Maybe to have some tactics. Do you want to aim for the real goal, which you have been presenting here? Think about that, or is there some kind of stepwise approach to allow some movement, to allow some kind of use of, for example, Posiva's encapsulation plant or something like that? What would be the best way to support the kind of public acceptance, trust on politicians, trust on local level? But now it's a really great time to have an influence.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Suvi?
Thank you. I'm going to be supremely boring and say public discussion. This has not been in media a lot yet. It has been a little bit. I think the last time a well-known renewable energy professor said that this would be sinking to the level of Russia. Now, if we were to accept other people's waste, I would like to see this more framed as a question of patriotism. We can be proud of what we've achieved, and we can help our other fellow EU member states, for example. So I would very much like to see this kind of discussion to begin with.
Great, thank you. So we're hearing lots of ideas for things that need to happen next. I have one question about, actually on the technical side. We know that the KBS-3 is a proven technology, and you're saying market it to the world. I'm curious how some of the technical folks on the panel think about the advancement of advanced reactors and the different fuel types that are coming into play, and how that may impact the KBS-3 plan or design. Maybe starting with you, Professor.
Okay. The safety case of KBS-3 rests on three things: the properties of the bedrock, the performance of the bentonite clay, and the performance of the copper canister. And as long as what's inside the canister does not eat it out, does not corrode it and destroy it from inside, it's totally insensitive. The only thing that you need to be careful about is the heat load, so that you can't put too much decay heat into the canister. That's a limiting factor. Jussi wants to complement this.
I want to say something. You were totally correct, but also the solubility of the waste form is a critical factor in the waste safety case.
The solid.
So the solubility
yes.
of the waste form. So it's for the solid form. But if you have different kind of waste forms, if they are solid, most likely you can develop the concept. If there are in some other form, you need to condition, you need to process, so that it would be low solubility. So if for example, if we take reprocessing waste that has glaze matrix, like in France, totally workable in the disposal, so it's a low solubility. So there are solutions, but of course that's engineering. Like we have been hearing all night, engineering is not normally the problem. So we can engineer our ways out, so techniques are not really a problem in this case.
Great, thank you. That's good news, because certainly if you're looking for customers from different countries and different fuel sources, knowing that that's a technical problem that can be solved and isn't a big obstacle is good to know. I think the next question I'd like to ask is, well, how are we doing for time, Rauli?
25 minutes.
Okay, great. So, Sanfred, you brought up this not in my backyard idea. In public opinion has clearly been a big topic throughout the session. But you're saying there are some communities that are willing. I'm curious to know, coming from a company that's trying to develop commercial multinational repositories, and in particular in some locations in Africa, something we hear often in the news from opponents is that it's dumping nuclear waste in a location. And I'm curious if, knowing that this spent fuel is coming from other locations, is there any risk to that concept of dumping nuclear waste being an obstacle?
Yeah, coming from the municipality sector of a specific kind of nuclear-related municipality, there is a certain expectation in community, and when people get used to the idea of nuclear, that it's not, when it's done in the right way, it's not an issue. It's a provider for work and sources of income, and it can be really meaningful regionally. And there are previous pollings, and we are currently just doing like updated polls to understand the overall understanding of the general population, especially in certain regions. And it's quite evident that people or communities as a whole would like to welcome this type of business. So it's really hard to understand how this has been so difficult in so many countries and regions. But surely there must be areas who would welcome this. And I know some concrete examples, and I have some paperwork in my backpack that I won't go into, but it's like we're just really wanting to see this happening, like even locally and community level. It may be that the last school in the area is dependent on a new project, and when something has been terminated, or there are these towns or areas where there used to be a manufacturing plant that has stopped, then all of the services gradually move out and people start moving out. So anything that is industrial investment may save their last restaurant, may save their accommodation capacity, invest in road work and schools. So this is regional policy, and I think it has a fair chance in Finland to resonate with the local politicians and national politicians. So I think there is a really good chance of now really impacting the legal framework in Finland.
Great, thank you for that perspective. I'm curious if any of the other panelists do see that as a potential obstacle or something that should be proactively addressed when we talk about public opinion, specifically in Finland.
I would like to say one thing about public opinion, which is that the approvability, let's say, or acceptability of nuclear energy or nuclear safety in general has always kind of gone up the way of everything is good, acceptability is okay. Something happens, we hit rock bottom, there's a tsunami in East Asia, so we have to shut down nuclear in Germany. We can't know now. Hopefully nothing will happen in the coming years, but something can happen. And if something happens anywhere in the world, let's say China is building massive amounts of new reactors, it will impact acceptability also here. And that is something that we have to prepare for and be aware of.
If I can add, I agree that I think like was discussed, that if there is benefits, people tend to agree that it's okay. But it doesn't happen really fast. I think it still takes time. So like Suvi said, the discussion should start. If you want to have this to happen, somebody should really start the discussion. Have some active things happening, not among these people, but on the actual municipalities to discuss, start to develop the acceptance, the kind of the trust among the players. I don't believe that it happens right in fast motion.
I think it really matters where the waste comes from. If it comes from another EU country, I would suspect that people are more open to accept it, and there's more trust because we feel like we're in Europeans and we're in the European Union. We have common legislation and regulation. So I think if we start importing at first from European countries before discussing importing from outside of Europe, I think that would make it a lot easier.
And I think also it comes about the technology because it doesn't have to. It's like a nuclear reactor accident could hurt, but I think if there would be another storage facility and then there would be an accident, that would really hurt also in Finland, even though it wouldn't be but that is like the same type of system. So that would be like I think the biggest problem that we could have. And I agree with that bringing from other EU countries is probably the first step and the easiest, and also. In a way, we need other solutions also. So I think it's part of this system should be also that we sell the technology how to create storage systems and build them all over the world, because it's kind of be like all over the world we cannot bring in the waste to the Finland. So it has to be smart, but I think also agree that we shouldn't think about with the borders of the countries. We should more think about the whole world, which areas are the ones that we have nuclear waste and which are also the areas that has the stability that we can build the storage facilities. So it should be looked more like what is smart and not where the country's borders are.
There is one country inside EU which is never going to export their nuclear waste to Finland or Sweden for final disposal, and this is Germany. Because the German anti-nuclear establishment has to maintain, has to keep up the image that the waste problem, quote unquote, cannot be solved. And if there is a solution, the bottom will fall off from their argument against nuclear. So And why the Germans are so, or the German-speaking Europe is so anti-nuclear is because of feelings again. And it's not a coincidence, it's a result of decades of indoctrination. Now we don't have time to go into the details of that, but it's really actually a fascinating story and a good lesson in demagoguery on how to create that kind of a mindset inside a whole nation. Suvi, I beg to disagree a little bit with your view of the next accident influencing things massively here in Finland. I don't think that it will. I mean, Fukushima did not. There was a little dip in the acceptability of nuclear, but the broad trend was very stable. And more or less the same applies in many other countries as well. And we should actually be ready to face the next accident, because it will happen. Something will happen and something will go wrong. And it's normal. Okay, the consequences are not that dramatic. I don't remember if it was you or somebody else pointed out that, I think it was you, saying that the consequences eventually are very local. Even if you have a massive nuclear accident, the consequences are not that drastic. If we have an accident in a waste disposal facility where the energies involved are very low, and the radioactive materials involved are mostly not very volatile or not very reactive, very little is going to happen physically. Okay, it's going to be a big deal. PR-wise for a couple of days, and there will be a lot of nasty footage about people going around in hazmat suits for a while inside the buildings, maybe. But the actual consequences are going to be very small. But perhaps you would like to disagree with me and argue.
Well, I mean, in one way, I think you're exactly correct. We haven't shut down nuclear energy in Finland because of a tsunami, so I agree. On the other hand, I was maybe thinking now in terms of accident regarding nuclear waste. As we heard, so far nothing has happened, and maybe it's not that easy to make it happen either. On the other hand, I don't think any human projects ever go exactly according to plan, so there's a very good chance something will happen. And then, I hate to say it, but there is a war in Europe. We have nuclear waste being stored in the middle of a crisis zone. If something happens there, the consequences will not be global, they will be local, but it can still have unexpected influence on public opinion.
I think we're more vaccinated against another accident. I think we can see this. We saw this in Finland when Zaporizhzhia was first attacked in Ukraine. I think the Finnish media handled it really well. It interviewed experts saying that there's no need to panic. It will not get here. Nothing will happen. So I think the media is also doing a much better job, thanks to, for example, our organization, sending emails to all journalists saying, like, whenever they wrote a story about nuclear and all the facts were like completely all over the place, we emailed the journalists. We encouraged our members to email the journalists saying, okay, I mean, this is not correct. You have to put this in the context. So I think we've done a good job with that, and I think the media is more prepared. I think the Finnish general public is more prepared, so I don't think there will be a huge effect. I mean, there's always going to be a small effect, but I don't think it's going to be big, even if something happens.
Does anyone else want to comment on that? I'm going to build off of that, but no, okay. I think really great points made, and Suvi, you read my mind. As we're having this conversation, I'm thinking accidents happen because we are human, and at some point something else is going to happen. And Thea, you went exactly where then my mind went, which is what can we be doing before something happens to mitigate the impact of it? And you mentioned the engagement with the media, the informing and the supporting. I'm curious if there are other thoughts on the best ways to mitigate the impact of when an accident does happen, to reduce the likelihood that it reduces your chances of being successful in what you're trying to achieve.
I think the first thing would be comparing nuclear accidents to other accidents that we are having. We don't talk about when we are burning coal that we are killing thousands of people every year. So if we would put that graph next to nuclear accidents, it would make people maybe think a little bit more like what is actually the problem and what is more dangerous. We think about the global warming. We are also that's killing 1,000 people. It's only increasing. So I think we should put it more in the scale of what are the other solutions that we have. Of course, it's not ideal to have accidents, but also not building nuclear energy, using fossil fuels, increasing warming of the global warming. That's deadly. So I think it's a bit unfair that nuclear energy should be the only one that can kill 0 people, and other areas it's like, well, it's normal to kill people. So I think that's like really unfair.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on that one?
Maybe just to support that, I think that's an important point. Coming from the safety regulator, maybe we don't have enough courage, but we are a little bit hesitated to bring that discussion from the regulator being responsible to evaluate the radiation nuclear safety. But we are totally on the same point that we should have more discussion about that the risk levels that we have, the threats that we have in the society, they are balanced, and the resources that we are putting are put on the right place. So we should have more like that kind of discussion. And I think also would like to politicians to start, because politicians in the end, through the legislation, are setting the safety goals, that what we want to protect in the society. So, and then the authorities are acting based on the legislation.
I always like to talk about the risk of not using nuclear energy. That's a huge risk. It's a much bigger risk than using nuclear energy. I mean, I always say that fossil fuels kill more people every day than nuclear energy ever has. So, I mean, that's what we need to think about.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a lot more of the public education and putting things into perspective proactively.
Right. I like the idea of keeping that information available, but I have always hated the notion that we would start to argue in favor of nuclear by the body counts. I'd prefer to go from the benefits that we have and the good things that we can do. And I believe that much of the current popularity of nuclear in Finland is actually based on the fact that it's a stable and quite reliable source of power at times when there is occasional shortage of power, and at times when there are big fluctuations in the price of electricity due to the ongoing changes in the energy system as a whole. So it is these actual practical benefits of nuclear that are making it more popular than or maintaining its popularity now. But it is true that this information about the other factors, also the body count, should be available, but I don't think that it can be the main selling point. I think it's the resource efficiency and then the reliability as a power supply that should be the main selling points.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask. I have a comment on this. Oh, sure. I was going to ask one more question and then open up for comments, so we could do comments first.
Let him talk. He's a good guy. Let him talk.
And we should go with the flow, please. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, Juhani. I have to comment on that Juhani's talk as 20 years back, when the local and national decisions were made of Posiva. I happened to sit in Eurajoki Municipality Council as a young boy, and one of the biggest reasonings to make the local decision was ethics or societal responsibility. Nuclear sector during the decades had generated a lot of prosperity, so it was time to take the responsibility on the local municipality level for the whole nation of Finland. And this local, really big decision has later turned into an asset. Very nice and good consequences followed to Eurajoki ever after even so before and even after. A lot of good, active, rich citizens came to small municipality. One of the benefits of nuclear, as Laura was asking a couple of hours back. So I believe that the same approach would now work out for Finland in relation to EU and others even. So attracting all these benefits to Finland and local levels as heard from Pyhäjoki also. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do you want to comment on it before we move on?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll ask one more question and then we will open it up for the audience. Again, in the theme of action and the time is now, I'd like to ask for you each to share either one thing that you're going to be doing based on this discussion after the seminar, or that you'd encourage the folks who are listening to do, or both if you want to overachieve. Maybe we could start with you.
Well, one thing that I am going to do is I'm going to continue to promote the SMR and MMR technologies in order to make sure that there is the customer base for these facilities that have been promoted today.
Well, it doesn't happen often that Finland is at the pole position in anything or any industry. And now we have this opportunity, and it would be really terrible to screw this opportunity up now. So I'm definitely going to be taking up this when I engage in other nuclear related projects and try to keep this up in national discussion this year and maybe next year when it's still relevant time to affect the law. But I'm really going to personally try to impact this, definitely.
One of the reasons I am running for the EU is the nuclear energy and getting it more acceptance, and also promoting that we have solutions for the storage problem, because many people, they don't even know that there is actually has been built a storage facility that is starting to run. So this is just like basic information that we should get to the people and has this discussion more, and also just to have people who are younger generation, women, green, that are supporting nuclear energy, just to break this like blocks that we have, that you are either pro or you're against. So these are like the basic thing, and of course I hope everybody is voting in the elections, and probably candidate who is supporting nuclear energy, not depending about the group, because we need in every group there should be people who are pro nuclear energy. So it's not coming as like political blocks that are fighting against each other. In larger context is of course changing the laws, making it easier, and also in Finland we need more support from the state for the SMR reactors, having like pilot together, changing the laws. So this is something we really need political focus on, that we can actually achieve this target to be the first, to grow big, be the responsible ones in the global scale. Because if the politics are the one who are saying maybe no, I don't know, maybe my voters don't like it, then nothing will happen. So we need to push politics and make them make this happen.
Well, personally, I've been sharing the story of Finland's repository everywhere I go. Last week, for example, there was an Australian journalist that came to Finland, and I arranged a visit for him at Onkalo and gave an interview. So and there's also a story in the Australian today that was published. So I will keep doing that. As an organization, we're going to launch an international campaign based on this report. So this is just a start. For us, we started a campaign last year called Water Waste, and it was like a positive campaign about nuclear waste, because we think it's the best waste in the world. It's taken care of, and you get very little of it in exchange for a huge amount of energy. So we're going to continue that work.
Okay, good. I would really encourage you to start the discussion, like Suvi said, to influence the politicians now, because the act is open right now. So now this year is the time to influence, and then our organization will be ready if there is a new repository. We will be evaluating safety, so we will be ready for that.
So if I was a bit more brave, I would start this huge, massive social media campaign. However, I guess I'm too introverted for that, so I will rely on my organization. I'm not going to say that VTT alone is in any way responsible for the current very big SMR hype in Finland. Certainly Rauli and Juhani and others have had a very big part in that, but I think we do. We have this kind of public trust in my organization, and I will do my damnedest to see that this topic would end up in our strategy and something that we further in practice, actually.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for those ideas and that action. How are we doing for time? Any time for questions?
8 o'clock.
No time for questions. We can have discussion after for people who want to stay around, I'm sure. Do you want to wrap up?
I'm going to wrap up very fast. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. Thank you for the great discussions. This panel, I'm so happy that you came. This was great. Please take a couple of copies of the report there, completely free. Take one to your workplace, cafeteria, to your family, friends, whoever, colleagues. I have boxes of those more, so I don't want to carry those back. Thanks again, and let's go get a beer or something like that, something to eat, and Diet Coke for Thea. Well, that's what she always
It's
said.
not because I'm fat, it's because I don't drink alcohol.
Yes, that was my point. I'll have one too. Okay, thank you and bye-bye. Good night.